Good evening and welcome to Queensborough Community College. My name is Arthur Flug and I'm the Executive Director of the Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Resource Center and Archives at Queensborough Community College. Tonight is somewhat of a very unusual event. And let me tell you why we're having this event. It's always easy to get a group of people together, such as you, who are community leaders, who have an ongoing struggle to be sure that the people you represent are treated fairly and equitably without any disruption in their lives. The reason we're having this hate crimes conference here is because something happened in one of my classes last year. I had a group of 5 students, all students at the college, and we all get together during the week and we of course study the Holocaust. During one session, I posed a question to them and I said to them, I want you to tell me where the incident I'm going to describe to you took place and when did it take place. And I said, here is the incident. I said, 4 young men are in a car traveling down a main street. The car is cut off by another car, and 2 thugs jump out of the car and assault the 4 young men in the car. And they say to them, after cursing them and beating them, we don't want your kind here. Why don't you get out? I asked the students, when did it happen? And all of them said it happened between 1938 and 1939, and it took place in Germany, which was the perfect answer for a student in a Holocaust class. And I said to them, no, you're really wrong. It didn't take place in 1938 and 1939. It took place in 2006, and it took place in Douglaston, Queens. And they did not know what I was talking about, and so I had to bring them up to date with current events, and I can tell by your response, you know exactly what the current event was. What we decided at that point was that we had to come across with a training program for community leaders such as yourselves that give you the skills and the wherewithal to take a leadership position in your community when all the programs we have on how to get along with your neighbor, how to respect other people's rights, what happens when those programs fail to work? What happens to the people who become victims? And so what we did was to put together, after a year planning, and many community leaders, many governmental leaders, a program that's basically a lesson. And the lesson is just what the name of the program says. What do you do when you become a victim of a hate crime? One of the great things that we have on campus in working in areas such like this that are outgrowths of the Holocaust Center is a president who has consistently, and I really underline the word consistently, whenever I have an idea and I go to him with it, his answer is always, it's a great idea, go ahead with it. Just make sure you have the money in the budget to do it. You all know what that means, but one of the things we've always been very fortunate is working with the president of the community college, and that is, I'd like to introduce Dr. Eduardo J. Marti.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Arthur. And the answer is yes, if you have enough money. I'm truly delighted that this has taken place, and I want to tell you why. There are basically 3 reasons why I think that this is so important. And I'm going to be very selfish, so important to me. Obviously, it's important to the community, it's important to the college, but I am extremely proud that this conference is taking place here. First of all, it could have taken place anywhere. It could have been taken place in Borough Hall, it could have been taken place in any of the other universities, taken place in a hotel. This is not a matter of a curriculum matter. It does not necessarily need to be in a college. But The fact that it's being held here is truly symbolic of the fact that this college, through the work of the advisory board, the volunteers, and last but not least, Arthur Flug, we have taken the purpose of the Holocaust Resource Center and Archives from being a repository of materials where people came to do research, and it has been there for 20-something years, 23 years, to a place that now educates high school children, community leaders, our own students. We have taken, literally, the Holocaust Resource Center and Archives from the basement of the library, sort of like in a lost down there, to a place that is known throughout the community as a place where we are able to not only study, but explore the consequences of prejudice. The second reason that I want to tell you about why I'm so proud of being here today is that the study of prejudice is something that is extremely important to me. All I have to do is look around this room, and I can guarantee you that every one of you, at one point or another, were subject of prejudice. I remember when I first came from Cuba, and I got on a bus from Miami to New York. And you know, I came in something that was akin to, not the same, but akin to the kinder transport that took place during the Second World War. All the parents in Havana, primarily in Havana, were sending the children by themselves to the United States. And some people had some contacts, other people had none. I didn't have anyone. I was 19 years old when I was sent, and my sister came after me at the age of 12. So I was in a bus from Miami to New York, and we stopped in Georgia, and this is 1960. And I went to the bathroom. I said, whites only, colored only. And I didn't know where to go. My grandmother is African American and Chinese. My father is Spanish. So, you know, where was I? Was I here or there? I wasn't going to go in the middle, so I had to make a decision. I looked around, I went into the whites only, and I prayed that nobody came in and did something nasty. So, personally, it was very important to me to feel the fact that we have to do something to understand what a person feels when that prejudicial activity takes place. And I'm also going to tell you something else which also molded my thinking at the age of 19. When I landed in New York City on a Sunday morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, I think it was November 22nd, 1960, it was Port Authority. And a person who was obviously homeless with a cart was coming down the sidewalk. And please forgive me for the use of this word. But as I was walking towards her, I was distracted, and I didn't realize that I was in the path of her. And she said to me something I will never forget. Look, boy, right? Look, boy, when a white person comes at you, you have to move aside. You're nothing but a spick, right? This was my first encounter with anybody in New York City, right? So, thankfully, what I took out of that experience is that this person was ignorant, obviously deranged, and clearly I was already in the path of going to higher education, and as I moved forward in my career, I realized that one of the things that we have to do as educators is educate not only the youth and the leaders of tomorrow, but educate the people around us so that things like that are not said and activities are not done that are hurtful of that type. The third and last reason is obviously when I came to Queensborough with all of that background, and I saw that we had a center for the study of the Holocaust. And I was very proud of that. One of the things that attracted me to coming here was that I saw that we had something like that here. But when I came on physically to campus, they showed me the Holocaust Resource Center, where it still is, and where is it? In the basement of the library building. It's almost as if we were ashamed of it. I don't think we were ashamed of it. I think we were protective of it. And I think that the President Schmeller created this center sort of outside of everything else so that it could flourish and be developed. But it was a study center. It was a place where people had to go to in order to do research. And I said to myself, well, all of that's well and good, but we need to bring it out of the basement of the library, and we may have to put it right in the forefront of the campus. And that's when it started, this whole trek that finally is going to be over. It may be over as we speak. If anybody here is connected with the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, in the city of New York, our CP is being vetted by the Legal Affairs Department. So if you know of anybody there, make certain we call them and tell them we need that CP because the money is in place, the contractor has been selected, and all we need is that CP to move forward. So construction could even start next week if this is vetted. If you do your job and you call the OMB and tell them that we need that CP. So that's all well and good. You know, I come in, I want to bring it out from the basement of the library to the forefront of the college. But what has happened was, and it was a very fortuitous day when Dr. Flug came to my office to tell me that the money that the city council had set aside for the Holocaust Resource Center was still there, but he wasn't going to be, he was working for Councilman Weprin at the time, but he came to my office to reassure me that the money was still there. And we started talking, and as we talked, I realized that he has a doctorate in education. He has been a high school principal, has been a high school superintendent. We were talking about going out to the high schools. And out of the blue, I said, Arthur, what would it take for me to hire you? Remember those days? And he said, may I? He said, well, you can't hire me because I can't make more than $25,000 a year. I said, you're hired. Between us, things have changed in that time. But it was a godsend. And really, I think, truly, I think it was something that was destined to happen because he was able to then take this beautiful center and take it out to the community. And what today is really a culmination of a lot of hard work. But what is happening here is that you, as community leaders, are coming to Queensborough Community College to ensure that you have the ability to network and talk about hate crimes, not as a reaction to a hate crime, not as a fundraiser, not as a political activity, but really as an educational activity. It is the epitome of what this center will be doing for a long, long period of time. So I am really delighted to be here. I am thankful that you're here, and clearly I am thankful of Dr. Flug, the advisory board, the task force, and all of the staff that works so hard to make these activities a reality. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moti. If you looked at your program, you'll see that the next speaker is Helen Marshall, our Borough President. And she will speak later on. As usual, with many elected officials, she's running late because she's speaking at a hearing over at the Sheraton LaGuardia East Hotel. But she will be here soon. In putting together this program so it emerges as a lesson and it doesn't become something that you've heard before, we wanted to clarify what we mean by a hate crime. Most people, when we started doing the planning, thought a hate crime has two parts. Number one, violence. Someone has to be hurt, assaulted. And number two, there has to be some reason that that person was singled out because of who he and she was, what they believed in, what they looked like, what their sexual orientation was, their economic status, their age status. Those two had to be together. But after looking into it and learning more about it, because it became a learning experience for us too, we found out that there is a broad array of hate crimes that exist that we really didn't even know were hate crimes. And in order to clarify this, we went looking for someone who could basically tell us and give us some insight into the broad array of issues that rise as far as hate crimes go. And we were very lucky. I'm not going to read his whole bio because you don't want to hear his whole bio, but we were very lucky in getting Tom Shanahan, the Deputy Commissioner of External Affairs, New York State Division of Human Rights. Tom is a litigator with communications and policy experience. He has participated as the lead attorney in many landmark cases regarding civil rights. He co-founded Families for Justice, a nonprofit organization that offers pro bono advice to litigants, and he was named in 2003 the Ethical New Yorker of the Year by Common Cause. Now, for an attorney to be mentioned as an ethical person of the year for New York, that's really something amazing. I'd like to introduce Tom Shanahan.
It was quite an introduction, so I'll try and live up to that. Thank you very much, Arthur, and I apologize, Danny, for speaking to your back. I bring greetings from Governor Spitzer, my Commissioner, Kamiki Gibson, at the Division of Human Rights, and on behalf of the entire New York State Division of Human Rights. I would like to thank Arthur for reaching out to me and the division and inviting us to participate here tonight. I'd also like to thank President Marti for graciously having this forum at your beautiful, beautiful institution. I walked around the grounds, and it really is something to behold. I've never had the pleasure of being here before. And I'd like to thank CUNY, the CUNY system, for sponsoring this college and this particular event. I'd also like to acknowledge our distinguished panel that's joining us here tonight. And again, it's a pleasure to be here and to participate in this forum. Unfortunately, the timing of this forum could not have been more appropriate. In the last few weeks, here in New York City, in upstate New York, Ithaca, for example, and in other places around the country, incidents have occurred which reflect the darker side of human nature. Those incidents reflect the reality that percolating below the surface of normalcy in our daily lives is a hatred and animosity for members of other racial, religious, and ethnic groups. These recent incidents demonstrate why civil and human rights advocacy is as important today as it was in the 60s and the decades that followed. These recent incidents stand as an example as to why people of conscience must come together in events such as tonight to discuss how we can better integrate and educate our communities, to teach people to both understand and to respect the differences, whether they be based on race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, national origin, or any other inherent human trait or characteristic. Our country is a country and will remain a country of immigrants. Our country was made great. As you look around this room, clearly this is an example of being a country of immigrants. Our country was made great by the differences that diverse groups brought with them when they traveled great distances to experience life in a free and democratic society. They did this without discarding their heritage and their sense of ethnic pride. They built new lives here in the United States and made our country a richer place by incorporating their cultures and their personal cultures and the cultures of their homeland into this great American melting pot. It is imperative, especially with the challenges we face here in New York City and around the country today, that the country continue to be a melting pot and grow richer rather than be watered down by fear resulting from the hateful acts of a few. Arthur was actually quite accurate when he originally reached out to me to see if we would participate in this event tonight. I was unclear as to exactly what role we could play in this forum tonight as you're focusing on hate crimes in the criminal context. Arthur and I engaged in a long discussion, and part of that discussion I explained that the Division of Human Rights has limited criminal jurisdiction but very broad civil jurisdiction. And let me just give you some background on what we do. In the packets that were handed out earlier tonight as well, you'll find our new brochure, which was just issued. My colleague Barbara Clark, who many of you know, is here with me tonight. We are in the process of printing that brochure in Russian, Mandarin, and Spanish. If anybody would like the brochure in other languages or other publications, you can speak with Barbara, or you can just visit our website and put a request on the website for them. But I encourage you to look at those materials. Our mission is really twofold. Number one, we have an individual complaint process. That complaint process involves approximately 10,000 complaints a year being processed. These are individual complainants who come to us either in person or through our website and file a complaint under one of the protected categories. Those categories are age, creed, race, color, sex, sexual orientation, national origin, marital status, disability, military status. We are among only 7 states that protects military status, arrest record, conviction record, familial status, and predisposing genetic characteristics. Again, in any given year, we will process 10,000 claims. The way the process works internally at our agency is you file a complaint, you will be assigned an investigator to look into the complaint. That investigator will meet with both sides, request documents, and come up with a finding of probable cause if they believe discrimination did in fact occur, or no probable cause if they believe that it did not occur. Once what we call a PC, or a probable cause finding, is made, the matter moves on. The division assigns a prosecuting attorney to represent the division and the state of New York to prosecute the action on behalf of the individual. It will go to a hearing. The hearing will be held before an administrative judge, and a determination will be made whether or not the person or the entity discriminated. The commissioner ultimately has the discretion to enter a monetary judgment to make the person whole for back pay, emotional distress, and we also have the power to order someone to cease and desist in their actions or to compel them to comply with the law. Again, this is the individual complaint process. For those, we talked about lawyers. Lawyers sometimes can obstruct a case as much as they can help a case. And what I think is a very unique part of our system is that you can file the complaint. If a determination is made, you need not retain an attorney. A division attorney will prosecute the claim on your behalf. So there's no 1/3 goes to the lawyers if you're successful. So again, a lot of people will come to our agency because they can't find a lawyer, but I suggest that you take the message back that we are here and we are a viable option to retaining a lawyer and going to litigation. Our process takes, at this point, substantially less time than going to litigation. The second aspect of what we do is we initiate our own investigations and we initiate our own complaints into patterns and practices of discrimination. Earlier this year, we commenced an action against a number of tax refund anticipation loan companies, H&R Block, Jackson Hewitt, and a third company, I can't recall the name. We began the investigation after we found evidence that they were targeting communities of color around the state for these high interest loans that are based on your anticipated tax refund. They will give you these, what we call usurious loans, and charge you exponential interest rates, and they're targeting communities of color, and they're targeting military families around Fort Drum and other major military bases because they recognize that when you have someone serving overseas, sometimes the families can run into substantial financial difficulty, and we don't believe that service members that are serving abroad should have their families targeted for these loans. So we commenced that investigation earlier this year. We're continuing that investigation. And again, it's an example of how we as a division can proactively look into and hopefully end practices that we think are discriminatory, because we'll never stop it if we take it one complaint at a time, the 10,000 a year that we process. We're seeking through these investigations and complaints to reach tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers through these investigations and complaints. So that's the mission, and that's what we do. And inherently, it's within the civil context. So that being said, when Arthur reached out to me, we discussed these missions, and as we discussed it more and more, it became clear to both of us that these are not necessarily mutually exclusive areas, that there is some linkage between the two. There is linkage between the two. And then we realized that a civilized society that allows hatred to breed and become commonplace whether it be in employment, housing, public accommodation, or other facets of society, creates an environment that leads to a rationalization in a non-rational mind that it is permissible to engage in discriminatory, bigoted, and sometimes violent acts against others. What we talked about, and your introduction was, you didn't know what I was going to say tonight, and you really reflected a lot of that conversation when you introduced me. For example, when a person of color is denied housing due to his or her race or ethnicity, it fosters an environment where hate is seemingly rewarded rather than punished. The denial of housing is a hate crime. When a gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgendered person is denied entry to a restaurant, a bar, or other place of what we call public accommodation based solely on their sexual orientation or identity, unless that wrongdoer is punished, it creates the illusion that we as a society have chosen to accept the conduct. So denial of equal access is inherently a hate crime. When a woman who asks for maternity leave and is entitled to it under the law is terminated or treated disparately, which means differently than the other employees, based upon that request, it detracts from everyone's right to work as if it, again, is left unpunished. It limits everyone's right to the economic opportunities we're entitled to in this great country. So discrimination and denial of employment is inherently a hate crime. One of the issues that you'll be hearing about in the near future and that we're really seriously investigating at this point, again, you will be hearing about this, and we have a couple of investigations going on throughout the state, is the issue of segregation. When racial steering or ethnic steering or religious steering separates communities by race, ethnicity, whatever the trait, the resulting segregation serves to erect barriers between us. Those barriers foster the breeding of misunderstanding and distrust. They lead to the violent acts such as the one that Arthur referred to earlier that took place here in Queens and are taking place across the country. We must not only overcome these barriers and end that segregation, we must break those barriers down. I'm about to wrap up. You got it. Okay. So in a sense, without minimizing civil discriminatory acts, we can make an analogy to petty criminals who go unpunished and tend to venture into the more serious and violent criminal acts over time. Permitting discrimination to fester in employment, housing, and public accommodation permits the wrongdoers to morph into hate mongers who then pursue violent criminal acts which create turmoil in our communities. That is something we, the division, will not tolerate and stand for, and we hope you will join us in that respect. I just want to say that it is an honor and a privilege to join you, elected officials and community leaders here today to strategize on how we can all work together to eliminate the scourge of discrimination in our communities, places of employment, public accommodation, housing, credit, and in other contexts. By working collectively, we can ensure that the civil rights of our country has guaranteed are real and unalienable. I thank you very, very much.
Lawrence. Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. What we want to do now, and you'll notice on the program, we have a brief video. This is a video that we obtained from the Anti-Defamation League that is used all over the country to train police officers regarding hate crimes. And so it's a brief video, it's a 15-minute thing, and let's go.
Hey, nigger! You're not wanted in our neighborhood! If you know what's good for you, you'll go back to where you belong! This is your last warning, nigger! Next time we burn your house down!
What you have just seen is a crime motivated by hate. It is cruel, and senseless. The purpose of the act is to instill fear. The crime was perpetrated against a family because of its race. During the next several minutes, we are going to explore the nature of hate crime. We'll see the devastating effects it has on the victims and very often the community. We'll also offer ways on how you, the police officer, can deal with these serious offenses. First, let's take a look at several other examples of hate crime.
Hello?
You listen real carefully, spick. That macho son of yours is dating a white girl. Unless you want his arms and legs broken, you see he keeps to his own kind. You got that message, spick?
The incidents you have just seen are unlawful acts perpetrated against certain people because of their race and color, and against private property because of a particular group's religion. When a bigot or a racist assaults you or desecrates your house of worship, he is attacking you for what you are. His purpose is to cause anxiety and pain. Some suspected incidents may be hate crimes even though the signs aren't obvious. The swastika, the threatening phone call, the hateful graffiti are missing. To the responding officer, for example, every fight may be recorded as an assault and battery, whether it involves two bar patrons arguing over a sporting event or two individuals arguing over a racial issue.
Mr. Singh, did anybody get hurt?
Officer, luckily nobody got hurt this time. But look at these steel balls. They are about £1 or £2 heavy each. And that's what they are using to break the windows. And we are concerned and scared that maybe this time they are using as a target shooting practice. And next time they might use actual bullets, and my children sleeps here.
Most incidents involve an offender unknown to the victim. Let's say there was no attempt at robbery or to take private property. When the victim of a crime is from a minority group, the absence of any other apparent motive should raise the question, is this crime motivated by hate?
Mr. Singh, you had mentioned about vandalism to your car before. Have you received any threatening phone calls against you or your family?
Officer, we didn't receive no threatening phone calls, but as you are aware of it, our car is the only one singled out and have been vandalized 5-6 times.
Right.
Since then, I did talk to my friends, and they suggested that in order to protect my family, I should buy a gun. But I decided against it because it won't solve the problem.
Well, you have a serious problem here, and I assure you that the police department will do everything we can to ensure you and your family.
The first officer on the scene of the crime has the most discretion in the criminal justice system to determine if an incident is a hate crime. Where there is any doubt, a common sense approach should be used. Consider all the circumstances. How does the victim feel about the incident? Statements made by the suspects. Is the victim from one racial, religious, or ethnic group and the suspect from another? Note those facts which demonstrate that the offense is motivated by hate.
I don't like them. I don't approve of gay people at all.
Well, the way I feel about the gay lords is I hate them.
I think it's wrong. They're giving out AIDS and stuff, and they're starting to kill a lot of people. It's wrong.
I'd smack them in the head. I'd smack them in the head.
Right.
A car had pulled away from the curb and was coming down the street. The strange thing about it is on both sides at the back of the car were people with what looked like baseball bats. And I became fearful, tried to cross the street. The car came around and blocked my way. I remember getting hit twice. I think there was a presumption that I was gay. I had 30 breaks and bones. They didn't think I would ever see out of my left eye again.
Hate crime is a special kind of crime. An act which may seem minor when compared to other crimes can often send powerful shockwaves throughout the community. It can raise tension between different groups within the same community. These acts create a sense of danger for minority citizens that their neighborhoods and even their homes may not be safe. When the police treat hate crime seriously, you send an unmistakable message to the would-be perpetrator that society will not tolerate such crime. You are saying to the offender, if you hurt people because of what they are, you are going to pay a price for your acts.
Mr. Green, can you tell me what happened here?
I don't know.
Did you see someone?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was night and the damn flames were burning on this thing, and we looked out, we saw some people. I mean, there were forms, they were white male adults, but who specifically, I don't know.
Have you received any threatening phone calls or any problems with the neighbors calling your names or anything since you lived here?
Well, no, I mean, yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, people call and hang up, but I mean, they do that everywhere. I mean, well, look, I mean, I gotta protect myself and my family. I mean, I gotta go get a gun or something.
No, Mr. Green. Elmer, finish up here. Let's go back inside and talk about this, okay? Mr. Green, usually something like this is the result of one of your neighbors, bearing out a grudge or, obviously it's a racial incident here.
I don't know. It could be I didn't talk to none of the people, but look, if these guys could come and do this to me, last night, they could get me anytime.
Mr. Green, I'm going to have more patrol cars come through the area, marked units.
Look, officer, I know you guys are doing the best you can, but you can't babysit this house 24 hours a day. I'm a prisoner here.
No, I can't guarantee we can be here 24 hours a day or 365 days a year, but we're going to do the best that we can for your family.
My kids haven't gone to school.
Come on, let's
My
go
wife
inside.
hasn't gone to work. I haven't gone to work.
I understand that, but we're going to do the best that we possibly can. We're going to be here as quick as we can.
The common denominator of all hate crime is fear. The victim has been violated because of his race, religion, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. Almost always, the emotional trauma resulting from hate crime stays with the victim for months, maybe even years.
George, don't go to school today, huh?
You don't want me to go to school because of that call last night, right? Listen, Ma, don't worry. They're just words.
Stay away from that girl for a little while.
What's the difference if I stay away from the girl or not? They're going to come after me just because of who I am. What are they going to say when I'm walking in their neighborhood? They're going to say, get out of here, you spick. You see what kind of people these are?
But they said it was going to hurt you, George.
Mom, they're not going to hurt me.
Many victims do not feel safe reporting these incidents to the police. There are various reasons for these fears, including the fear of retaliation by offenders, or because people are afraid of the police based on their perception of the role of police in other societies.
It's really shocking to think that somebody would do this to a holy place where people are praying.
Well, I really felt personally devastated because this is my synagogue and this is my real home, and this is the place where I feel that I can live my life as a Jew.
As a child, I had a personal experience of being accosted by hooligans as I was leaving my Hebrew school, and after they overpowered me and drove a large nail through my hand and called me Žid, which was the language of that country. And this was only because I was Jewish. And here, some 40 years later, I had not yet really escaped that. And here it was vivid right in this great country, happening to me all over again.
Good evening.
My name is Edward M. Pilardi. I am the police chief of the West Orange Police Department. Rabbi, thank you for inviting me here this evening to speak to your congregation regarding the cowardly anti-Semitic act which occurred last evening to the synagogue. I am here to express my profound sorrow to the entire Jewish community. It is incredible that hate crime groups such as this can occur as we approach the 21st century.
Responding to the needs of the victims is more than coming out and taking information. It also requires your giving assurances that you will take the incident seriously, that the prosecutors take it seriously, that such incidents are a priority, that you think such incidents are terrible, and that you will provide extra protection for the coming few days or weeks or as long as it takes. Bringing in community leaders to assist you can be very helpful. Community leaders who are trusted and respected by members of their community may be told more details about an incident than the victim was willing to tell the police investigator. Many officers understand what it is to be the focus of hate. For some people, your uniform marks you as a target. You are called to respond to a disturbance, and when you get there, both parties turn on you and taunt you with slurs.
Car 31, respond to rear of the Beverage Housing Project. Narcotics transaction in progress.
Car 31, acknowledge. On our way.
Be careful here, Mario. Nobody's moving. Something's wrong. Make sure you look up. You got it.
The call about the crack dealer was a setup to put you in a vulnerable position, to humiliate and possibly hurt you. Hate crime can touch anyone from any group. On a quiet Saturday morning, a young white woman cleaning her car was assaulted in this neighborhood because of what she was.
I was washing my car in front of my apartment building when a black man coming to the building told me my car was in his way and that I was a fucking white bitch. I didn't understand what he was talking about, and he ran up to me with a fistful of keys. He stuck them in my face and told me he was going to kill me. He had the keys in one hand, and I noticed in the other hand it was full of newspaper bags. And I realized he was a newspaper deliveryman. It took the police about 6 weeks after I reported this until they finally found him. I couldn't leave the building, I couldn't go to work in the morning, and I couldn't come home at night by myself. He was always out there, and he had the keys to the building. After they finally caught him, I felt great relief. But I really wish that the police had taken me more seriously, because I wasn't bleeding and because I was lucky enough to not be hit by him. It was a low priority to them when it was a very high priority in my life.
Well, look at what we got here. Let's screw with this nigger. What are you doing in our neighborhood, boy? You don't look like you're making a delivery. You lose your way, nigger, or did you just forget where you belong? Hey, boy, I'm gonna whip your hand. Yeah, it's white boy's turn now, nigger.
When attacked, victims of hate crimes feel isolated. Your understanding and your assurance that you will do everything possible to help is crucial to them. What you have just seen is the personal tragedy that accompanies hate crime. Victims are left devastated. Children, wives, sweethearts, parents. The perpetrators know the victims are vulnerable.
Go to work in the morning.
The haters strike not for monetary gain, but because they want to cause pain to someone, because of their race, religion, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. Usually, the victim belongs to a minority group and is perceived as different. It is this difference the perpetrators attack. Your job as police officers is to recognize the special nature of hate crime and to send a clear message to the perpetrators of hate that the police are going to prevent, intervene, and respond with the full power at their command. We are also saying to the community and to the victims that we care. The department wants to get involved, and we will do everything possible to protect them.
Andrew P. Jackson of the Langston Hughes Community and Cultural Center of the Queensborough Public Library, Rajinder Singh Khalsa of Khalsa for Peace, Councilman John Liu, who will be here shortly, okay. Chan Fenster, President of the Queens Jewish Community Council, Assad Bajwa, related to the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam, and Dan Drum, founder and leader of the Queens Gay Pride Committee. I'd like to offer a few questions to you, and I'd like some brief answers. I underline the word brief. Okay? Let me start off. Dan Drum. Experience personally with a hate crime or working as head of your organization?
We had a hate crime committed in July 2nd, 1990, against a young Latino man named Julio Rivera. Many of you in the audience may remember. And at that time, there was no hate crimes law. And we had a very difficult time getting the police even to respond to the case. In fact, I had even referred the case to a detective who was on vacation for 2 weeks. And that told you the priority that they placed on the case at the time. And as those of you who are involved in organizing around the issue of hate crimes, you know, one of the main obstacles to the passage of the hate crimes bill, of course, was the fact that lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community was included in that. I also want to say that in 2000, we had another murder of a young man named Steen Keith Fenrick. He was killed by his father, and his body parts were chopped up and left in Alley Pond Park. And then when the police found out about the case, the father ran up to the roof of his home in Dix Hills, and it was televised on the air, et cetera, so forth and so on. And unfortunately, again, in 2001, we had another murder of a young man named Edgar Garcon. And Edgar Garcon was killed as he was coming home from a bar in Jackson Heights after a night out by, we think, 2 or 3 people. And actually, that case is going to trial. The trial was started over the summer, but there was a mistrial declared because when the mother got on the stand, she sobbed, out of control, and they felt that, it prejudiced the jury against her.
Okay, Dan. Okay, good insight into that. Mr. Jackson.
I'm glad the clarification was made regarding that all hate crimes are not violent crimes, because they could be seemingly insignificant incidences. Being in a store and a security guard follows you around because you're black. Going into an office building and the security guard searches you when you're going there for a meeting. Going to a counter and asking to look at an object, and all the clerk wants to do is give you a price, which means you can't afford it because you're black. Going into a restaurant and being ignored, and somebody comes in behind you and they serve that person and you're still waiting in line. So I've experienced that all my life. But at the same time, if I ask for a hand of people in this audience who have worked with me through the Langston Hughes Community Library and Cultural Center, on committees, on projects, you'd see a number of multicultural hands because I've worked with through this library for the last 28 years to try to make a difference in the borough and in the community that we live in.
Okay,
At the same time,
good.
one
All
more
right, go
legacy.
ahead, go ahead.
I teach a course at York College, Introduction to Cultural Diversity, purposely because I want students to sit down and learn how to communicate with each other, learn about each other, because normally we deal with culture by food and dance, but we don't learn anything about the people. So I make sure that that's one of the things that I do as an adjunct at York College.
Okay, thank you. Jan Fenton,
Okay. 2.5 years ago is one example of what happened in the borough of Queens. Many of you would probably remember that there were swastikas drawn on bus stops and cars around 164th Street and Jewel Avenue. Those swastikas read, the wording read, "Kill the Jews on July 14th, 2005. And a little bit of research revealed that on July 14th, Hitler declared all political parties other than his own illegal in Germany. So the response to that was an immediate press conference, community-wide, involving community leaders, involving elected officials, involving religious leaders of all religions, all coming together to say there's no place for hate in Queens. In addition to that, right on this campus, on July 14th, again, the community unified. It was the Borough President, it was President Marti, it was the JCRC, Queens Jewish Community Council, the Kupferberg Holocaust Resource Center and Archives. Again, we had a marvelous program of Queens unifying against hatred and for tolerance. That was the community response to something. As was already pointed out, education is very important, and we certainly engage in that year-round with whatever other groups join us in the partnership. I'm sorry, I neglected to say that on July 14th, we also were very pleased to thank the New York City Police Department, particularly the 107th Precinct and the Hate Crimes Task Force, because they immediately jumped on the case and were able to find the perpetrators.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Thank you. Mr. Kalsa.
All of us, thank you very much for inviting me here for this important meeting. Why the crime, these hate crimes happens? I feel the people don't act as their religion properly. When I face the hate crime, they are Christian, they beat me, left me unconscious on the street, on the sidewalk. They are Christian. And they were celebrating the christening party in a restaurant. Outside the restaurant, they were drinking, they beat me there. They thought I am Arab. But I feel why even the Arab people should be beaten if they are not bad, they are not doing anything bad, if they are innocent. And I was looking the Bible with my friends one day, and I saw there, it was 1 Johanna 4:7. If you see when you go home, Johanna says, love each other if you are children of God. And they were Christian, they beat me. And they were celebrating the christening party.
Okay. Okay. Could I ask you to hold for just a minute, and we'll come back to you, but I want to go on to the next person, then we come back for our second round. Assad?
Thank you. My first experience of a hate crime was at a very young age. I came to this country at the age of 10, and growing up in Queens Village, I was called, the first thing I was called was a Hindu, which is very ironic because I'm Muslim by nature, but at that time you can't tell which religion you are. And that really had a very profound impact on me, being called a Hindu at such a young age. And this was many years ago in Queens Village. Kids are very insensitive at times, but I was very, very loss of words in this country. It was my first 2 months I was here when I was called this. But in the recent future, in the last couple of years, one thing I really appreciate about this society, especially in Queens, as Jan has mentioned and as everybody has mentioned, there have been hate crimes against different communities, but as a community, many members have come out and supported each other, not because they're victims, but because as a community, we support each other.
Let me put the second question to you, and everybody here will have a chance to answer. In dealing with hate crimes, you've talked about your emotional impact, what took place, what you felt, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. And Assad, when you said you can go back from being 10 years old, and you're a few years past that age, we can see that you are now still feeling the hurt. What community organizations, or what organizations at that point, when you became a victim of this, did you go to for some type of assistance? And tell us a little bit about what your experience was. Mr. Khalsa?
Whenever hate crime committed against an innocent person, all of us, he hurt bodily, physically. When anybody physically injured, wounded, very simple, like about my community, we are first generation here, maybe second generation, has to work hard. We are having families and all those things like everyone. If anybody injured, cannot go to the work. If cannot go to the work, cannot make money, but cannot stop the bills.
Okay, good point. Dan, what about you? You see what a high budget we have. We have 2 microphones here. Go ahead.
In the gay and lesbian community, people turn to the New York City Gay and Lesbian Anti-Violence Project, which is out of Manhattan. At that time, when the murder of Julio Rivera first occurred in 1990, there were very few organizations in Queens that people could turn to. Now, thankfully, there are a number of organizations, including the Queens Lesbian and Gay Pride Committee, which people could avail themselves of that actually exist here in the borough.
Okay, thank you. Jan?
As I mentioned, there was certainly the New York City Police Department. We worked together absolutely with the Queens DA's Department, with the Jewish Community Relations Council, with the Holocaust Resource Center. Now we can work with the Human Resources. And of course, we have always had a good relationship with other ethnic groups throughout the borough. And so we've gone to community leaders and to religious leaders.
Okay, fine. Okay, Mr. Jackson.
When I was younger and my immediate reaction was anger, I'd go to my father. And my father would calm me down, my mother would calm me down. They were both a good calming force in my life. Secondly, I would go to my pastor, who was really proactive and an activist coming out of Georgia and a Morehouse University minister. Second, I'd go to as I grew older, the NACP Legal Defense Fund. And then as an adult working with the community, one of the first organizations I got involved in through the Langston Hughes Library was the Queens DA's office with the committee that Jesse Sly still works with at the Queens DA's office.
Okay, thank you. Assad, your last one.
Well, in this day and age, there's many organizations you can go to for, but especially if you're a Muslim and you have particular problems. One of the larger ones in New York is CARE, which has an office in Manhattan. But I know many Muslims have been turning to, especially New York City Human Rights Commission as well in the past couple of years. So they've really expanded their operations there.
Okay, thank you. Now, we have time here, and we go there. What about people here in the audience? All of you are community leaders. All of you are down here tonight for a specific reason because you're interested in this. Can anybody here who would like to get up and share what experiences they've had as a community leader dealing with problems such as we're talking about here, or problems such as you saw in the training film? Would you like to take the microphone up here, please? Thank you. And just tell us your name, your organization, please.
Mohammed Shirwani. I'm director at the Center of New York. On the second day of 9/11, we got a call with all the curses and everything, and we were shaken.
Could you speak a little louder, please?
We were shaken, and the guy told on the phone that you have no business here. You so and so and so and so. Get up. We tried to tell him that we have nothing to do with this and that, but he would not listen. When I came down to the lobby, I found a beautiful bouquet of flowers from our neighbor, old lady, and said, "We support you. You are doing a very good job. Keep it up." So at the same time, the society, the community, there are two phases of that. Thank God. The hate crime is going on. It is reducing. The government is doing good. Society is doing good. But there is lack of education, which you guys are doing excellent job. But immigrants, they are very busy in making money. 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and they do not pay the attention. Especially I know about my community, Muslim community. Even lawyers and doctors and professors and teachers, something happened to Assad. Assad's father should have gone to the police. I'm sure he didn't go. It happened to my family. They don't care. We should report the matters to the police. And police is very happy. Even 30 years ago, when I'm sorry.
Wonderful. Let's have it for Larry, please, okay?
Even 33 years ago, when we started Muslim Center, and we sometimes casually would come in Pakistani, what do you call it, the clothes. There were 2 or 3 kids, and they would say pajama party and this. There was a crime. We called the police. Police told us to take that young kid to the family court, and his mother came. But the judge told mother that you take care of this kid, otherwise it will be written for his whole life. Okay. Mother was very cooperative. Things were done very well. So we have to go to the law, and we have to go to our organizations, and all of these organizations, like whether it's a Jewish organization, Muslim organization, Sikh organization, they are doing the same job. We should not be shy of going with this or that. We should work together.
Good, thank you. Anyone else like to come up? Swaranjit, you're next. Please introduce yourself and your organization.
Swaranjit Singh, President of World Sikh Peace Foundation. And at this point I would like to share, there are situations, it happens all the time here. Hate crimes happens still every single day. And how do we respond? I'm in a business. In my business, when I send out the mailings to people, I send them 6 by 11 big cards. People call me, send a hate mail, I call the cops twice. There are 2 people. Out of ignorance, the very important thing is, wherever there's ignorance, there's a fear. Out of fear, hate takes birth. So what we have to do is basically try to educate people. People have no idea, like Asad just said before, people called him Hindu and he fell back. I'm being called Osama all the time. People have no idea who the Sikhs are. People would call Osama, and when 9/11 happened, it is a very unfortunate thing what happened in our wonderful country. And somehow some people cannot tolerate the point that kind of living we have. So this is the reason people hate us, but we live in a wonderful country and we have a lot of rights, and we should use those rights, and this is the country we should be proud of.
Thank you, Sergeant. Ms. Steinberg, would you like to go up? Next. Again, your name and organization.
Hello, everyone. My name is Phyllis Steinberg. I'm the president of PFLAG New York City. What that is parents, families, and friends of lesbians and gays. And what we do is we offer support to families who are coping with accepting their gay loved ones. We try to educate the community and advocate on behalf of our family members. Now, there's something unique about the discrimination against us, our children, our families. Not everyone born is African American. Not everyone who is born is Jewish, and not everyone who is born is Muslim. But everyone is born with a sexual identity. So what happens is, while there may be many people who accept gay and lesbian, it's universal across the board that people dislike gay and lesbian. And we have to have education, so from very young, so that we can try to teach that all people are equal.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next, your name and organization, please.
My name is Arana. Excuse me for not getting up. Being old and disabled, I take the privilege of sitting down. I have, as the editor of one of the South Asian Insider papers, I'd asked her to make me look pretty also on the round. Okay. I just have two questions. One is from the gentleman from Mr. Spitzer's office, and one is from the library, one of my favorite haunts these days. My question is, I worked in security before I got into the press. Usually we used to have, and you just raised that topic of blacks being followed around in superstores or whatever, because they are black basically, and that's a kind of hate crime. But if the detective is a black and he follows another black around to see if he's going to steal, would you consider that a hate crime? That's number one. Yes. Number two, to the gentleman from Mr. Spitzer's office, who's also one of my favorite lawyers. I just want to know, we come from different countries, and in different countries you have different ethnic communities inside the country. Like I come from India, and believe me, we have 25 states, which is almost like 25 countries. The North Indians, South Indians, the South Indians hate the North Indians are more brawny, and they call the South Indians weaklings or a dirty rice eater or something. And that goes on, and some of that comes here also. And I have faced this where I stayed in a house where a North Indian was, I won't classify which group. Yeah, North Indian was the landlord, and he would just give me a hassle because I was a South Indian. Would you classify that as a hate crime?
Let me just say something. I didn't really talk about why I got into civil rights. So as I was listening to these stories, I wanted to explain that. When I was growing up on Staten Island, my mother's from Iran. My father's Irish, and she immigrated to this country. And before the hostage crisis, when I would tell my neighbors that I was part Iranian, they had never heard of Iran, they said, "No, you're an Indian," and they would pick on me for that. And then, when the hostage crisis happened, I would be on the school bus going home from school, and my last name was Shanahan, and the kids would chant, "Shanahan, Iranian." It was very, very bad, and it really affected my sister more than me. But I do think when you're confronted with those things, either you cower into a corner, or it makes you stronger. And you learn from that, and you dedicate yourself to making the community better. And I think when I came out of the closet because I'm gay, that was another challenge for me, and I wasn't going to back down from who I am. I was very proud of that, and I've also become very active in the gay community. And I think that everyone here tonight helps to end the kind of hate crimes we're talking about when they stand up and they affirmatively take pride in who they are. Now, as to the questions you asked, and I'll be quick, Arthur. Number one, anybody who targets, whether it be a black officer and a black young man or in a store, anyone who targets or stereotypes somebody based upon their race or ethnicity, clearly that's discriminatory, okay? Clearly that's an issue that needs to be brought up. And if anyone was to see that happen, they should report that to the NYPD so it can be looked at, because we can't tolerate same race discrimination in that context. Number two, on what you said, yes, I think that's obvious discriminatory conduct as to how you were treated. And it potentially, depending on the facts, it can rise to a hate crime. But again, I think that if we're empowered by the challenges that we all face when we're confronted with this type of conduct, and we're empowered to make things better by acting together.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah. Tom, thank you very much.
Brother.
I want you to know how really proud I feel of all the people who are here getting up and sing, because everybody here is telling their background, and I'll take half a minute. I'll just take half a minute. When I was raised as a kid, my folks both came from Eastern Europe, where they experienced quite a deal of, but the guiding advice they gave me was, don't get involved. I didn't listen, okay, but I always remember, don't get involved. And whenever I get up in front of a group like this and say, I'm glad you're all here, I hear my father saying, Arthur, don't get involved. All right, that's it. But however, having get involved, we're here today, and one of the people that I like to introduce, and we'll get to the questions in just a minute, please, I'm not forgetting you, we'd like to ask Borough President of Queens, Helen Marshall. Please come up here.
I would like to hear what everybody's saying. That's the best part.
Okay, we got to the point in the program where we talked about hate crimes. We saw a training film that the ADL uses for training police, and the panel that you've now become part of has been talking about their experiences with hate crimes and also their reaction to government agencies regarding this hate crimes. And now we're having a speak out from the community that's here regarding that. Would you like to go ahead? Please, your name and your organization.
My name is Naomi Kupferberg, and I'm from Flushing Quakers. And I would like to suggest that there is one group of people that are subject to hate crimes and have been for centuries in every culture, and that is women.
Okay, thank you. Next, Hannah Deutsch. Would you like to go up, please? And then Harbor Chan Singh. Yeah.
My name you heard. I'm with the Jewish War Veterans.
Name, please.
And we have an action committee because we believe we hear, don't delay, do it now. We are in contact with all the local police districts, precincts, and we work with them. It's very, very important. You have an advertisement on TV at the moment. The MTA is thanking people for having reported things last year, and that is the most important thing. You cannot delay anything. We had the desecration of a cemetery in Queens, and we caught them, and we handled them. So don't think any job is too big. All of us together, we have to do it.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you very much. Next, name, please, and organization.
Harbor Chan Singh, President of the Sikh American Friendship Foundation. First of all, I'd like to thank and commend Dr. Arthur Fluke for arranging this beautiful forum. I would like to start with a quotation from Martin Niemöller. As you know, in Germany, first they came for the Jews, and nobody spoke up, and nothing happened. Then they came for the communists, nobody spoke up, nothing happened. Then they came for the Catholics, and nobody spoke up because I didn't speak out because I was a protestant. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I was not a trade union. And finally they came out for me, and there was nobody there. That is a quotation. So that shows that it is very important for everyone to be in solidarity with each other. And a hate crime against one community is a hate crime against every community. And a hate crime goes to the very fiber of the community, and it affects the very emotional and security of the people of the community. I would like to say I was impressed by New York City Council member Jim Gennaro recently in a swastika case, where he said, rich or poor, the Jews will come looking for you. The Catholics will come looking for you. The blacks will come looking for you. And we will come looking for you. And we will get you. And we will take you to the hill and prosecute you. So that shows how firmly he was embedded into this policy. So what I'd like to add is then he proposed $1,000 for information leading to the apprehension of anyone who committed the swastika acts. We have been lucky that our DA has always assured us that every hate crime will be vigorously prosecuted, will be vigorously investigated, and severely punished whoever is found guilty.
Okay, thank you, Harbitron, because I have other people going on. Please.
We are a country of immigrants. Whether we came here, there is no you or they or me. We are all together here. Whether we came by the Mayflower or we came by the slave boat, we are all in the same boat now in subjects such as terrorism. We have to stick together, and we have to fight together so that we can protect ourselves.
Thank you, Harbitron. Next. Sir, come up. Leo, then you. Will those people like to speak? If you'd like to line up, it would help easier. Leo? Name, please, and organization.
My name is Lakshman Gudai. I'm the former president of the Hindu Temple, sitting member of CB9 and treasurer of the Queensborough Community College. I was born in British Guyana. My foreparents are from India. I came here in 1972. I lived in Manhattan until 1974 when I went to Richmond Hill to look for a house of mine. Went to the real estate and tried to open my door. Youth from the neighborhood could not get the car door be opened. Slurs were echoed and I couldn't look at the house. I went back and eventually I went to the real estate. I got a house and then we opened a Hindu temple on 125th Street and 101st Avenue. We could not get out or we could not get in, but with the help of the police we were able to accomplish what we had to accomplish. I will read a quotation here from Martin Luther King Jr. It says, violence as a way of achieving racial justice is both impractical and immoral. It is impractical because it is a descending spiral ending in destruction for all. It is immoral because it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather than win his understanding. It seeks to annihilate rather than to convert. Violence is immoral because it thrives on hatred rather than love. And I think that's a very, very strong statement. Now, if we are to look back, how
Could I ask you if you can make it 1 more minute because we have 3 more people going.
1 more minute. I want to ask Mr. Tom a question. In 1856, the Chief Justice Rajatani stated clearly, and I quote, the blacks had no rights to which the white man was bound to respect. And for For the Declaration of Independence, Abraham Lincoln fought for the emancipation of slavery. And he made a statement that, and I will quote also, there is a physical difference between the white and the black races, which will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. And in so much as they cannot so live, while they do remain together, there must be the position of superior and inferior. And I, as much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. From that day until now, with all the things that are going on, how do you answer, where do we stand legally with regard to violence and bias in general?
Obviously, I don't agree with that quotation. My colleague is sitting here, Pat, is from the New York City Commission on Human Rights. Excuse me, it's getting late. I'm with the State Division of Human Rights. What I can tell you is you must have, and you have a DA in this county who's proactive about hate crimes. He takes them very, very seriously. If in fact things occur, there's no superior race in this state and in this county, okay? Whether it be in the civil context of the denial of a job, again, as I said earlier, clearly to us, if you're denied a job because you're African American, you're Muslim, whatever it is, that's a violation of state law. If in fact a hate crime is to take place in this county or any place in the state of New York, it should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Listen, I don't believe, and I don't think anyone in this room believes, that we will ever accomplish or be the country that we have been, and we continue, and we can be, if we have different classes of citizenship. And I think that applies to some of the folks that are here, over this driver dispute, maybe not legally. But if we have different tiers of citizenship and different tiers of superior versus some other class of citizen, that we'll never fulfill the dream of this country. We just can't do it.
Yes, sir. Name and could I ask all of you, the four people who are waiting there, to please be brief? Yes, sir. Name and.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Ram from the Hindu Temple Society of North America, the very first temple built in the United States. Thanks for inviting me here today. I'll be very short. We all know the hate crime exists. Now, I'm going to make appeal to all the community leaders here today. What we need to do is stop the friction, get involved in this community. That's what I do in my temple. I'm a coordinator for the youth group and also senior citizen group. First thing I tell them is respect each group, accept them as brothers and sisters. Then automatically the hate crime reduces, minimize the friction. That's what I would like to tell everybody. And my parties are calling them, we work very hard in the Russian community, bring the groups together, bring a lot of cultural activities, and we also entertain people. That way it reduces the friction. That's what we need to do in the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next. Name and organization, please.
I'm Marcia Poster from the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County. We're located in Glen Cove. And we started as a Holocaust Memorial and Educational Center, but from the very beginning, our motto was from prejudice to genocide. And now we've changed our name to include the tolerance, because we still do education. And there's my colleague and friend Anita Weisborn, who is here, and one of our survivors who testified. You have to start young. You know the song from The King and I that children have to be taught to hate. They have to be taught not to hate too. So we have started first with middle school and high school, and we have a program for police cadets also, and hospital personnel. But we now intend to use puppets and start with kindergarten through the schools, because you have to change the attitude of the children. Sometimes the children have to go home and change the attitude of their parents. Because what they hear at home is what they grow up with. That's it.
Thank you. Next, please. Name and organization.
I'm a PTA president and I have 37 kids. I've been involved in the community for a lot of years, 46 years old. I'm glad I'm here in this program. I had called Monique for something else, and she was telling me about what was going on tonight. She invited me. I'm just gonna say this is beautiful. I saw the video and I didn't know that was a hate crime when I noticed something there in the video. My father, he's got Puerto Rican, handsome, like he used to tell me. Well, I noticed that once when I was 12 years old when he was. He was murdered. That's why we moved here. But I don't have nothing against Italians or my family mix. But I went to a lot last year. There was a gang that was after my family because I was involved in one of my prison. And they were calling me a snitch. They thought that I was the one snitching and they were like the same. But you see, I learned from my father. When I saw that they beat up my father, I said, Daddy, why you didn't defend yourself? You're strong, you got muscle. Why you didn't fight back? You're a boxer. I said, I'm sorry I'm like this, but I get too sentimental. He said, because I'm tall and handsome and black. Don't hate nobody. When you get married, just don't let nobody put a hand on you. When I have my grandkids, teach them not to hate. Well, last year when all this Kupferberg gang came to my neighborhood, my son was telling me, Mommy, don't call the cops because they're calling you a snitch. I said, I'm not going to call the cops. I'm going to call the gang unit. It's going to be a one police sponsor. Because I used to volunteer over there also. I don't get paid or nothing, but I volunteer. I didn't care. And I spoke to one of them. They came to the neighborhood and I said, please, before they kill my son, like they did to my father, then there's going to be a lot of murders in this neighborhood because I'm not going to take it. They came, they stopped. I got involved, I got stronger, like one of the guys said. I got real strong, I got involved in the community meeting because I got 4 younger kids. And I did this gang thing with John Lou. We did a march because 2 of my friends got murdered, kids, their children got murdered. And it wasn't because white or black, it was because stupidity gangs. I got involved, I got stronger. Halloween, this year, it was peaceful. You didn't see no shooting in my neighborhood because I live in the West Block. And I received a lot of calls from Chinese, Indian, people that I know that knows the way I am, and they say, Lisa, what did you do that there was no hate throwing, no shooting, no stabbing, no killing? I go, because I appreciate 109 prison. They did a good job. And because I was snitching, the block is getting better. And I'm going to be stronger, and I'm going to keep doing this. And I'm glad, and I'm proud of all of you, because it's not, people say white, black, Hindu. No, it's not that. It's your own type of people also that wants to go against you.
Okay, thank you very much. Leo.
My name is Leo Wexler, and I'm with NAHOS, the National Association of Jewish Child Holocaust Survivors, individuals who were Holocaust survivors, who were either children or teenagers. We meet about once a month in the Parkey Synagogue in Manhattan. About a year ago, a day or two before our scheduled meeting, vandals vandalized the walls of the synagogue with swastikas and descriptions of Jews going at gas and things of that nature. Now, we don't know whether these hate messages were directed against us, the survivors, or against all the members of that synagogue. But either way, we reported it to the police, and I must say leadership of the police was very satisfied with the reaction. During the day of the meeting, 2 policemen, both 6 foot something, in uniforms and with boots and with machine guns, were at the entrance, probably to protect us any harm. Unfortunately, there was an unfortunate side effect because many of our members had very bad experiences with uniforms, men in boots and with machine guns. And in fact, some of them were trembling when they came in, were traumatized, and didn't even quiet down for a few hours. Now, our leadership was so concerned that we really didn't know what to do in any future event of that nature. So should we notify the police or should we let it go? Some people argue that either way the police didn't have much security. And if anyone over here has a solution for this kind of problem, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Ken, could you please introduce yourself and your organization?
Ken Cohen, Regional Director for the New York State Conference of NAACP branches and Metropolitan Council of branches, which are all 14 branches in New York City, and President of the Northeast Queensborough. The NAACP will be 99 years old in February of 08. We have, and in 09 will be 100, and our celebration will be here in New York City because this is where we were founded. Founded by a group of diverse people, not just for African Americans, but for a cause of civil rights. Today, unfortunately and fortunately, we still have a common fight. Yes, there are many differences. Our battle has broadened because the people in our communities reflect the world. As we're in 09, we were just a small group of people of Jewish, religious people fighting for freedom. But the cause is still there. And we need to bond ourselves together here today and every day when we speak on these issues of hate. Because in the past 60 days in New York City, we have seen a rash of hate that we have not seen before. And it's becoming too common, and people are using every excuse under the sun. And as was said earlier, we must increase penalties so that people fully understand that they cannot, it's not a prank, it's not a joke, it's serious. No matter what color, religion, no matter where it reflects on each and every one of us in this room, we must send a strong message, not only to the city council, not only to Albany, but down to Washington. And we must tell them that they must increase our hate crimes. So the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, because people come in all colors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Just a minute, please. We'll get to you. We'll get to you. I'd now like to call on next speaker, Helen Marshall.
Thank you very much, Dr. Flug. I thank each and every one of you for participating in this very important discussion. I'd like to recognize Jesse Sly, who's getting ready to walk out. We just sat together today, along with people from Howard Beach. The district attorney called us together because he wanted to give us an update, and the people, the leadership in Howard Beach, wanted to know what the city was doing about the things that happened just more recently around the Halloween season. And they are very concerned. The community is in uproar, and it's sad. But believe me, the district attorney is working very diligently and hard, and he has to interpret the law and carry out the law. And so he cannot say it's a bias crime, it's not a bias crime. He has to have all the facts, and so that when he stands up, it's the law and it's correct. I just said that as an aside, and I do want to, isn't this a beautiful center? Yes, the Holocaust Center, yes. And I remember when we were dedicating it outside in the sun one Sunday morning, it was wonderful because it's a place where we're all going to really look for peace, look for harmony, and look for love for one another. And tonight is one of those very special examples. And of course, it's great that you're doing it this today, now, when we need it so desperately. I want to thank Dr. Flug and all the members who participated. Susie Tannenbaum from my office. Who else do I have here? My deputy counsel, Mark McMillan, is here, and others, right. We take this very seriously in our borough. In fact, when I first came into the office, but when I got elected and before I actually took the seat, I thought about the things that I could do that would make a difference that I wasn't able to do in such a large scale in both the Assembly and the City Council. And I came up with the idea of a Queens General Assembly. Too often we're reacting in crisis, okay? We can't always resolve in crisis. Sometimes it's a good starting point to settle something, but it's very important that we do it with civil minds around a table, talking to one another and getting familiar with one another. And so that's exactly what has been happening with the Queens General Assembly. A number of our members are right here today, and we've taken people from each community board, 2 people from each community board, and then some. And Susie establishes, and she has a group around her. She's a very special young lady. I actually brought her to Borough Hall with me because I knew she could do the job, and she's surely doing it. Well, they sit around, they get to know one another, they can discuss issues with one another. There is no hostility there. I believe in the fundamental human being. I believe in it. I have seen through my lifetime that if you just put people in the room together, they will work it out. There might be some that are going to take a little longer than others, but it will eventually resolve itself. And it certainly has done that with the Queens General Assembly. Andrew is one of the advisors. We have a whole team of people that are advisors for the General Assembly. And when I sit down with them, one of the things they say to me is, Mrs. Marshall, this takes the human experience and spirit to another level. And I'm so glad that I've gone through this. I'm going to talk more directly to each and every one of you as human beings. I am an African American, and if you think I haven't experienced prejudice, whoa, big time, okay? But my experiences all along have shown me that I can't make a statement about a group of people so easily. I can't do that. Because I have had experiences with people of all different nationalities, and that's really the joy of living in New York City. It's the joy of living in New York City where you're going to run into all kinds of people. And sometimes the people that help me, you might say, oh, that's definitely a prejudiced person. They weren't at all. They helped me very fundamentally. And so we all have to remember, and I'm saying that to everyone here, you just can't say, oh, all of them are bad. You can't do that. You never know what the experience of that other person has been. You'll never know what they've been through. And not only that, you don't know how big their heart and mind are. So that's really the message that I wanted to bring here today. Of course, I do have a little statement. I'll read it very quickly. Something is not right in our great city. Swastikas are being painted on synagogues. I better put my glasses on. And bus shelters, reminding us of the dark days of the Holocaust. Nooses are being hung in trees and on trees and indoors, reminding us of the darkest days of this nation. And in relationship to that, we had a revolution go on in our country. Big revolution. You wouldn't call it a revolution, but let me tell you, it was a revolution. It was the civil rights movement. And we had a general. His name was Dr. Martin Luther King. And why was he so successful? He was successful because he had a powerful weapon, love, L-O-V-E. He loved his fellow man and woman. And as a result, he gathered together people from all different nationalities in his fight to get freedom for African Americans. But he always said, if you push the people on the bottom up, you're pushing the whole world up. And he carried on a very successful fight. He gave his life for it, we know that. So for him, it was really very personal. So that if we can just remember to love one another, if we just remember to love, don't judge people just when you look at them. Face them with an open mind. That's so very important. According to the New York Police Department, hate crimes are up 20% in New York this year. I don't know why. Sadly, we know about the hate crimes in Queens. The very term hate crime became familiar decades ago in connection with the racial incident in our own Howard Beach. Here in this room, we have Sikh neighbors from Richmond Hill who were brutally beaten in the wake of 9/11. My friend right here. Just weeks ago, I stood by with many of the young Israel of Hillcrest just more recently because another beautiful synagogue had been defaced. None of these crimes should be happening in Queens, the most multi-ethnic county in the United States, and possibly the most culturally diverse area in the whole world. These horrible acts are not at all representative of what our borough is all about. In my view, you are the real Queens, the people who are here today, the community leaders, the people of goodwill, neighbors living and working, studying and playing and worshiping side by side. And this year we will be celebrating the 300th year of the Flushing Remonstrance, where somebody stood up. That somebody was John Bland. And when the Dutch insisted that only their religion be practiced, he said no. And he was defending the Quakers. The lady here said she's a Quaker. He was defending the Quakers. He said, no, we're in a new country. And in this country, everybody ought to be able to practice whatever religion they choose to practice. That happened in Queens, New York City, right there in Flushing, okay? You understand that hate crimes emerge from the darkness of ignorance, and that the best way to stop them is to shine the light of understanding through education. That is why we are here tonight. During this program, we will hear from experts and activists. I'm going to go over that because you already have done that. But there are also opportunities to pool our experience, insights, and knowledge because we all have to be part of the solution. Let tonight truly be the beginning of the end of hate crimes in our wonderful borough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. Could we get a picture over here of the whole Borough President with the whole committee? We all look over here. One more, let's go. Okay. Okay, thank you. Good. Just a minute. Now, when we have been talking for a good part of the evening about our experiences, our feelings, what took place. What I'd like to do now is call upon those people whose job it is to deal with the issues that we are confronted with. And I'd like to call Sergeant Lynch from the NYPD Hate Crimes Task Force.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of my commanding officer, Michael Osgood, I couldn't be here tonight because we've been quite busy, as you all know. But I'm going to do a brief presentation on what we do and how we respond, and I'll show you a brief definition of what is a hate crime. Tonight is it's kind of surreal for myself. We spoke earlier of crimes here in Queens. We have Mrs. Tulsa. We also spoke of the incident in the 107 precinct where swastikas were spray painted all over that neighborhood. I actually was the supervisor that investigated the case, and thank God we were able to bring these individuals to justice. These crimes are very serious. The city of New York takes them very serious. The police department takes them very serious. One other thing I would like to mention is, thank God Mr. Tulsa didn't lose his life over an incident as silly and menial as his religion. Basically, the overarching concept of this presentation, I'll briefly speak about identity-motivated criminality. I'll also speak briefly on group victimization. And also non-threatening hate speech is protected speech. And even listening here at this forum, a lot of people are addressing the issues of walking through malls, of being called derogatory statements. I can only talk on behalf of the police department, and we investigate what the New York State penal law defines as a crime. I'm not undermining what are bias issues. I'm not undermining some of this hate speech. I totally disagree with it, being an African American, both of my parents from the South. But I will say that if this crime or act falls under anything in the New York State penal law, we will catch you and convict you with the assistance of our DA. We work very closely with the Queens DA. We actually work closely with all the DAs in the city of New York. Not like other units. My unit is comprised of 20 detectives. The 20 of us, we respond citywide. So at this time, as the Borough President stated, with hate crimes up 23%, over the last probably 3 months, I believe we're up 53% year to date. We kind of look at it as maybe a spike based on the Jenna, Louisiana issue. We've had 16 news cases. Prior to that, in my 4 years being here in the unit, I don't think I've ever seen a news case. So it could be some copycat ignorance at its best, but you better believe we're looking to make some sort of arrests and convictions on these things. I'll start off by talking about the primary function of my unit. Is, again, we're here to fight crime. The responsibility is to criminally investigate these cases. We fall pretty high on the food chain. My unit, although we're a group of detectives, we work directly for the chief of detectives. I don't work in the local squad. We actually turn out of One Police Plaza. We answer to the chief of detectives, who again answers to the police commissioner and goes directly to the mayor. So the city takes these crimes very seriously. When I spoke earlier about identity predictability, it falls back on a gentleman called George Kelling, named George Kelling. He's a world-renowned sociologist that created the broken windows theory. And in his theory, he talks about how if we ratify the small issues, the small things, the big things will kind of fall in order. And one of his theories, he talked about the right to predictability. And what he meant by that was we have the right to walk outside of our house without being a victim of a crime. We have a right just to know I'm going to get up today, I'm going to wash my car, I'm going to go to work, and I'm going to come home safely. That's your God-given right. Well, we kind of we one up that one. We kind of talk about the right to identity predictability. I was born this way, I can't change. I worship this way, this is my personal religion. So I don't think by going outside, wearing whatever I choose to wear, whatever religious garb I wear, I should be a victim of a crime. In this scenario, very briefly, he talks about the right to predictability when an older woman comes out of her house in a walker. She gets to the bottom of the stairs, and a 14-year-old kid on a skateboard rides by and knocks the lady over, and she breaks her hip. Well, her right to predictability was violated by this kid. Now, can we say we can arrest this kid for being reckless on his skateboard? Probably not. But her right to predictability was violated by that young man, and he should be taught better. Again, as I explained before, your right to identity predictability. We protect each of our citizens by the New York State Penal Law Article 485. That's the hate crime, New York State's hate crime statute. That was brought into existence in 2000. Prior to 2000, the New York City Police Department, we did have a function, the Hate Crimes Task Force, but at that time, we were the Bias Investigation, Incident Investigations Unit. And at that time, we were probably like 15 strong. And basically, before 96, we kind of just calculated data. We took in data, we went, responded out, we worked with our local detectives. But after 96, we took it upon ourselves. We brought in a lot of investigators, and we investigate these cases ourselves, with the assistance, if needed, with the local squads. Article 485, Penal Law Article 485, defines identity-motivated criminality, also known as a hate crime. And basically, this states the following. A person that commits a hate crime when he or she commits a specified offense, intentionally selecting a person against whom the offense is committed, in whole or substantial part because of their belief or perception regarding race, color, national origin, ancestry, gender, religion, religious practice, age, disability, sexual orientation of a person, regardless of whether the person, the belief or perception is correct. And that last part kind of confuses people, but we use this scenario. If I'm walking down the block, walking my dog, and that day I happen to put on my pink Izod shirt, and a group of teens walk by and call me some derogatory anti-gay statement, and they intend to assault me, it's because they perceived of what I was. Well, they were wrong in this particular case, but still they'll be prosecuted to the fullest as if I was. These are the 10 protected classes under the New York State Penal Law: the race, color, national origin, ancestry, gender, religion, religious practice, age, disability, and sexual orientation. The hate crime statute itself is not, in fact, a statute like an assault. Assault is the crime. Hate crime statute is not the crime. What it actually is, it's an enhancement penalty. Once we charge the assault, the criminal mischief, the aggravated harassment, this charge attaches to it. Upon conviction, the charge is bumped up to the next degree, which actually alters the sentencing. If in some cases where it's a misdemeanor, it'll turn around and become a felony. Determining factors that we use in the hate crime task force, first thing we ask is this in fact a crime? And again, for someone to call me an anti-black statement, due to the Constitution and the First Amendment, people can say some nasty things, and at this point, that's not a crime. We also have to find evidence that the crime committed was identity motivated. What brought us to this level? What did this person say? What did he identify me as? Did he call me a black so-and-so? Did he call me a Jewish so-and-so? Was it identity motivated? And then we find out if the evidence to support that is whole or substantial identity motivation. And then to put it all together, we take the crime, the identity, and a substantial part, and we bring it together, and that's how we define a hate crime. And a lot of people that are not from, born here in America, they kind of have a hard time with that because of these constitutional constraints that we have. But we try to explain that to them through several ways. The hate crime statutes, as you see me here now, we speak out at community meetings. We go to houses of worship to talk about hate crimes, to define them so people can understand exactly what it is that we do and how we come to these conclusions. And a lot of times, people will call my office direct, I'll give my number, and ask me, the police came and they did nothing. How could they sit here and this man called me every name under the sun and you guys cannot do anything about it? And then I kind of explain to them the constitutional constraints, and then they say, well, I understand that. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. At that point, my hands are tied. Without a crime, there's nothing I can investigate, and I can't go forward. But I can refer them. And we work with several organizations, including the New York City Human Rights. We work with the Anti-Violence Project. We work with various organizations as well that we can refer this stuff to. And maybe they can help out or even come up with some civil lawsuit. Now, what I came here for is to speak about the Hate Crime Task Force response process. When an initial act is committed, the sector car comes. The police officer shows up. He analyzes the situation, as crazy as it may be. If he feels, you know what, this may be a hint of bias, he steps it up to his supervisor, which is a sergeant or a lieutenant. At that point, that supervisor overlooks the situation, and he calls in his captain. Captains in the New York City Police Department come out on several incidents. They respond to several incidents: bomb threats, police officer shootings, major incidents in the community. Well, this is one major incident that he's going to respond to. When he responds to it, it's him, the duty captain or her, that will call my office. They'll make the notification to us, and we, one of 25, 22 people, will respond out to the crime. That could take anywhere from a half an hour to an hour, but based on his response is when we will respond. At this point, we talk about the hate crimes in the city. To date, I just walked out of the office. I believe we're up to 291 cases. Last year, the total year, I think we had 253. That was the lowest year on record within the last maybe 8 or 9 years that we've been keeping this data. The top 4 categories for us are anti-Semitic, anti-sexual orientation, anti-black, and anti-white. The 3 top categories are criminal mischief, aggravated harassment, and assault. Based on what I've seen, a majority of our crime is committed by probably people from the age of 20, 22, 23, probably as low as maybe 12 or 13 years of age. And that's probably will fit in that criminal mischief category where they'll vandalize property using a swastika, writing anti-black, anti-white statements. The most vicious assaults I have found personally is probably anti-gay assault. Why that is, I have no idea. And briefly, we talk about the Constitution, and we talk about freedom of speech issues. And again, these are some reasons at times that we can't act. And then we talk about non-threatening speech is protected speech. Non-threatening hate speech is protected speech. And a lot of people will argue that this speech and rhetoric will cause the hate crime itself. But in my position, there's nothing I can do about that speech. But the community can reach out. The community can fight against this speech and this behavior. And hopefully society itself, it'll quell it. Yes, ma'am.
How do you deal with non-threatening hate speech in cyberspace? When you have YouTube and there are threats made on YouTube that are of a hateful nature?
Well, again, if it's non-threatening speech, there's nothing I would do. But if it's some sort of communication, hate communication, going to someone, threatening communications, we're probably looking at along with our computer crimes unit. We would actually go after it.
That's not considered a freedom of speech scenario.
Depending on the threat, depending on the level of the threat.
Is burning the cross protected speech?
Burning the cross is now protected. Burning the cross, the noose is not. At this stage, the hanging of a noose is not. So as vile as it is, and at this point, there's not much we can do other than investigate who the perpetrators are and what their means were. Now, if you put it on my door, I will not investigate it at that point as a hate crime, but I can say it's at least a menace. It's a physical menace that you're going to harm me. Yes, sir.
Could you explain aggravated assault? Because
Aggravated harassment? Aggravated
Could
assault.
I interrupt for a minute?
Yes.
Excuse me, can I interrupt for a minute? The questions, we're going to have a portion later. At the end, we'll take those, okay?
Okay, I'll finish up. Yes. Here we talk about several cases in the past. We had one recent case, last maybe 3 years ago. Carlos Vives. Carlos Vives was an introverted gentleman that sent over 200,000 emails out to people all over, basically stating that he didn't believe in the Jewish faith and the Jewish faith wasn't legitimate. He offended quite a few people, even to the point that we were referred to the case. But based on his speech, he never stated that he was going to harm anyone. He was just barely purporting his beliefs. And at one point, he offended someone, and the 5th Precinct arrested him, and he filed a lawsuit and won. Well, basically knocks out a portion of the aggravated harassment statute, and that portion talks about written communications and things of that nature. So at this point, we can't prosecute under it, and it falls under this hate speech issue. And the termination of a true threat, again, if a person says to me, Ron, I hate you, I hate the way you look, I'll kill you. If I could, I'd kill you. Now, based on that alone, to me, I wouldn't say that that's a true threat, because if he could, I guess he can. But now if he turns around and says, when you get home tonight, your house is going to blow up, I'm going to bomb your house, that's what we would consider as a true threat. And based on that speech with that true threat, we would probably effect an arrest on that or investigate it more thorough. And this is just a question-answer portion of it. And we talk about immigrant communities, and this is how I'm going to close. Some communities report more than others. Our stats that we show you are cases that were actually called in. People reported these crimes. I know in certain communities, from where they live or they were born, they originated, they don't report, they don't go to their police, they don't trust their police. Well, I say this to you. The New York City Police Department, if you report the crime, we're going to come and investigate it. If you have an issue with your status, whether or not you're here legally, I have never asked in 18 years a person, are they here legally? I don't care. Now, to reverse it, if I arrest you and you are not from here, that may be a question I can ask you. But if you're a law-abiding person or citizen of this city, I will not ask that question. And Mayor Bloomberg actually signed Article 41, which states that question shouldn't be asked. No one should ask these questions. No one should take anything against you for reporting a crime. Also, again, we talk about our outreach unit. We have an outreach unit, and we also go out to your community. When our numbers come up, I'm passing out pamphlets. Please read the pamphlets, take it back to your community. If you want us to come in, we'll come in. Although we're stretched very thin right now, we'll still get somebody to come out and talk to your community or your church about our hate crimes. And that's Article 41. And that's truly it. I thank you again for having me. I personally enjoy coming to these forums. I like to see them. And thank you very much for having me.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do, now that you heard from the NYPD, I'd like to call up the other half of the family in dealing with hate crimes, and Mary Ella Herring of the Queens District Attorney's Office, Gang Violence and Hate Crimes Bureau. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
I have nothing to say. He said it all, basically. Thanks a lot. Let me rip up my pages here. I'm the Bureau Chief of the Gang Violence and Hate Crimes Bureau. I want to thank, first of all, Borough President Helen Marshall, President Marti, Professor Flug, Susie Tannenbaum, and all the people that put this together, because it's so important for us that do the legal work, open up a file, read the facts, walk into court, to really get in touch and hear what the community is feeling when these things happen. So it really reinforces for me the work that I do day to day. So I thank you for inviting us here. We go to a lot of meetings like this, and each one of them revitalizes me and tells me how important the work it is that we do. We work very closely with the Hate Crimes Task Force. My bureau, besides gang violence and school crimes and graffiti, the main purpose and the origin of the Bureau was the prosecuting and investigating bias crimes. We have a Bureau of veteran prosecutors who are specially selected to be in this Bureau and become experts in handling these particular kinds of cases. And they are very serious cases and very complicated cases sometimes. The emotions of the community feel hurt over what has happened, and we have the job of now putting the evidence together and determining whether we have enough to prosecute a case. Sometimes the evidence is just not there, and it is really a very difficult job to address the concerns that a community has when we can't find the evidence. Our bureau, even if the hate crime is not found, will still handle the case if there are racial overtones. So we will still be there to lend our expertise and the experience that we have in prosecuting the case. Just so that you know, we have a 24/7 bureau, and by that I mean there is an ADA available 24/7 to respond to incidents involving hate crimes. And by that I mean when an incident occurs, the district attorney's office is notified, and an assistant district attorney is available to either go to the crime scene, speak to a victim, prepare search warrants, and assist the police in any way they can to further the investigation. And that's where Hate Crimes and Task Force comes in. We work together on these cases. Once there is an arrest, we get the case, my bureau, and we have an ADA who handles the case from beginning to end. The biggest tool that we use is the hate crime statute. I have copies of the statute here, which you can take with you, which will give you the language. This statute, which was enacted in the year 2000, has been a very powerful tool for us. And basically what it does is there has to be a crime. There has to be an underlying crime, whether it's robbery, assault, criminal mischief. They're not all violent crimes. And there are enumerated crimes where we can apply the hate crime statute to. That's also in the statute. And what happens is it elevates the crime one step up. So if it is a D felony, it now becomes a C felony. If it's, for example, assault in the second degree, someone is injured with the use of a weapon, that's a D felony. It now becomes, when we charge it, assault 2 as a hate crime, it now becomes a C felony. And so the defendant, the perpetrator, is now exposed to more jail time and more severe punishment. And that's basically how the statute works. There is, as Sergeant Lynch indicated, there's no hate crime. It is attached to a crime. So many times I get calls from victims. They are having issues with housing or their jobs, and I have to explain to them that the district attorney's office handles crimes. There has to be a crime attached to the hate crime. So that is what triggers our involvement in these incidents. If someone does receive, now there was, Sergeant Lynch talked about the First Amendment and free speech. If you receive hate mail, I believe that you should report it to the police, because it is for us to determine whether it's protected speech or not, okay? So if you receive anything in the mail, if you get phone calls, you should still report it to the police. We should be aware of what's going on in the community. there's been several times in the time that I've been there where leaflets have been handed out and put on parked cars, which expressed anti-Semitic sentiments, anti-immigrant sentiments. Even though that may be protected speech, it is still investigated. It is still something the police department should know about. We are also involved, and it gives us an idea of kind of what's going on in the community. So it's so important for those things to be reported. Again, we will make the determination whether it's something that we can prosecute. The things that we look at, just so you know, in determining whether we have enough to prosecute a case, we look at the words spoken during the incident. We look at the different ethnicities or the differences between the two groups involved, the defendant's group and the victim's group. We look at, is there an overreaction to what happened? Perhaps there's a parking dispute and all of a sudden somebody's out there with an axe or a gun. Is there an overreaction for what happened? Is there any other reason why this had happened? If someone is walking through a neighborhood and that person is attacked, no money is taken, he or she doesn't know who the perpetrators are, and they did nothing to provoke the incident, then we have to start looking at it and say, perhaps this is a hate crime. Who's involved? Where did this take place? What words were spoken? So all those things together we look at, and then we make the determination. Of course, the hate crimes makes the first determination, but then we have to look at it and say, do we have enough evidence to prosecute this case? And that's where it gets very complicated. The hate crimes is the only time that we have to show motivation or motivation for the crime when we try the case. We don't have to show why somebody was robbed. We don't even have to show why someone was assaulted. We only have to show that the perpetrator, the defendant, hit this other person and caused physical injury. This is the only time we have to actually prove to the jury why the defendant committed the crime. And that's like reading someone's mind. It is very difficult. But again, it's taken very seriously in our office. We have a bureau committed to it. And I have seen for many, many years the consequences of acts like this. Because when a robbery occurs, let's say someone is robbed on a corner, their purse is taken, you know what? The victim doesn't have to go back to that corner. Okay, you can run it, and the community rallies behind the crime because crime is wrong. When a hate crime occurs, unfortunately, the victim cannot change anything about their conduct. They are who they are. They can't change the color of their skin or their religion. You can't run away from it. You can't protect yourself. You're exposed. The second thing that happens is the community feels polarized. All of a sudden, we start to see the groups kind of splinter, okay? The offenders, the defendant's group, let's say, feels, well, now we're all being judged. We're all bad. The victims group feels we're all going to be victims. They have fear. So it is devastating for a community to have hate crimes occur. And that's why this city really takes it seriously. If you have any questions, I'll be here to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. One of the reasons we've had this type of format was due to an event I went to about a year and a half ago at Hostos Community College. I received a flyer saying that there would be a community dialogue on hate crimes, and I went up to Hostos for the presentation, and I met someone up there who I'd met before in another capacity through the New York Jewish Community Relations Council, Rabbi Bob Kaplan from Cause New York. And he had a format that he used in presenting this and calling for community action. And I'd like him to come down right now and speak to us briefly about what he does.
Thank you all for being out this late at night. We get paid to do it, you guys don't. So, not that they pay us a lot to do it, mind you, but we do get paid to do it. But we do it because of a passion, because of a belief, because of same reasons that you do it, because this is simply an unacceptable series of events. Sergeant Lynch said before, it's a 53% increase year to date. That's simply unacceptable. The fact that everyone's sitting here on the panel and that the Borough President's here is a statement that this is unacceptable. But making that statement sometimes is simply not enough. There's a lot of homework and a lot of work that needs to be done. I spent most of the day in a all-day conference with imams and rabbis organized by a number of organizations. And at the end, I gave a presentation. I talked about two of my teachers. One is Max Weber, who is a political scientist, who said that it's 2% of a population, the leadership, that really predicates how a society works. The other one was Smokey the Bear. You all familiar with Smokey the Bear? Some people might not be. He was a cartoon character that was on television for many, many years during the 50s and 60s and 70s, and said, only you can prevent forest fires. And he taught me a very valuable lesson as I sat there being babysat by the television, is that we are really responsible for preventing the forest fires, not just putting them out. And certainly the devastation that we're seeing right now in San Diego, which will be around for a long time, is really telling of what that means. So it's the kind of work that needs to go in forums like this, where you guys get informed about what happens when a hate crime happens. What does NYPD do? How do they react? Because frankly, a lot of you just don't know. And you say, well, it's a hate crime. Well, maybe it's not. Or maybe, how do we report it? And then once they've made a determination, how does the DA's office handle the prosecution of a hate crime? But most of all, how do you as community leaders make sure that hate crimes get reported to the NYPD? Because they are ultimately responsible for making sure that it's investigated. Because if it's never investigated, it never gets into the statistics, and therefore we think there's a lot less of it happening, even though we find it detestable, than is actually happening. And one of the reasons we started doing more and more forums around it at Hostos Community College, and primarily in Brooklyn and in Staten Island and other places as well, here and now here out here in Queens, was because there was a lot of stuff just not getting reported. When the Council of Pakistan Organizations, headed by a very dear friend of mine, Mohammed Razvi, did a survey immediately following 9/11, he had 733 incidents of what would have been considered hate crimes that he had filled out forms for that were never reported, because frankly, the people, A, didn't know how to report them, he didn't know how to report them, and people were afraid to report them from the Pakistani and Bangladeshi community. The Chinese community, other communities, I'm sure it happens in the Sikh community all the time. People are just not reporting. And reporting is essential, and we got to make sure Sergeant Lynch and his 30 detectives are 30 or 20, did I get it right? 30, 20. Are not only have the resources that are necessary to do this kind of investigation, but the city puts it as a priority. And I just got a text message, the wonder of email. Right now, my agency is having a board meeting with Dennis Walcott. And we were able to convince Dennis, with the mayor, to have a meeting with leaders next week. We're going to work on it tomorrow morning, to bring together more resources to do this kind, Deputy Mayor Dennis Walcott, to do more kind of work around hate crimes, but the prevention needs to be there as well. So this is where Smokey the Bear comes in. We need to make sure that there's an atmosphere in our communities where this becomes unacceptable. So it starts in the schools, it goes into the colleges, and it goes within all of our organizations, and that's where Weber comes in handy, because you as leaders, as that 2%, need to create that atmosphere. You need to go from here back into your organizations, back into your communities, and saying this is unacceptable. So some of the stuff that we've done to make this happen is, of course, the forming of the coalitions, the kind of work that the Borough President described with the group of ethnic leaders that Susie's brought together throughout the borough. It needs to be done in communities. It needs to make sure that we're dialoguing in communities. You need to make sure that Sergeant Lynch comes into your community and does a training into your community, talking to your community. And if there isn't stuff in language, you need to translate it into language, because they don't always have the resources to do it, but you have to become a helpmate. So what we did with We Are All Brooklyn, which is a coalition that was founded in Brooklyn, we took the hate crimes information, put it on a palm card similar to what you guys distributed, and made sure it was translated into 7 different languages, and got it out to all these different groups. And then we made sure that the leaders in these 7 different languages, in other words, organizations in these 7 different languages, were primary points of reference. So if somebody got a call, they could call one of these groups in their own language, get help in their own language, and then it can get reported. Because if it doesn't get reported, the resources don't go there. So you have to become part of the solution. It isn't just them doing it. It isn't just the NYPD, it isn't just the DA's office, it isn't just the Borough President's office, it isn't just them doing it, it's you doing it. And that's what you're here for. You're not here just to be informed, you're here to be enlisted in a process of making sure that this stuff doesn't happen. And when it does happen, it gets reported and goes through the system in the right way. And that if the system is not listening, you have to make sure the system listens a little bit louder. But it goes one step further. It's making sure in your own communities that if you hear hate language utilized within your own communities, that you say like this, I don't put up with that. That you answer people back. That you make sure that when you speak to people within your own communities and your own organizations, you say to them what you just said is simply unacceptable. And that you run forums in your communities to make sure that your folks also think that this stuff's unacceptable. Because we may think it's unacceptable for my community, but I can do it to the other guy. You know? So maybe I can hate the gay guy, I can hate the Chinese guy, I can hate the other guy. Guy is a non-sexist term in my terminology. It could be men and women. I can hate the other person that it's okay to hate. None of it's acceptable. None of it's acceptable, and you as leaders have to go back from here and make sure that there is an effort within your organizations to teach, to organize, and to allow for things to happen. Now, I know that you're going to do a little bit of that thinking right after I shut up, and that's really the most important thing for you to do, is for thinking and the next steps. And I know Susan's going to talk about the next steps, but you have to be charged up and committed enough to make sure that you are willing to say it's unacceptable. I'm going to tell you one brief story, because I am a rabbi, so I get to tell stories, and that's one of your downside. That's the price of admission. And is that in Brooklyn, a year ago this month, there was a hate crime. Well, it's an alleged hate crime, because it hasn't been, and that's something for us to always be aware of, because it hasn't been fully prosecuted yet. 5 Orthodox Jewish youth allegedly beat up a Pakistani fella. Now, that could have turned into not only an alleged hate crime, it could have turned into a forest fire, because there are 180,000 Orthodox Jews and 80,000 Muslims sharing a community in that part of Brooklyn. Now, that sounds like a pretty combustible type of community, right? Well, leaders in that community, the next morning, when the media showed up, they said, okay, it happened, let it go through the legal system, and we are standing against it, united. When more media came later, and we always blame the media, they said the same thing. When more media came, they said the same thing, and you want to know what happened in that community? There was no forest fire. Because leaders took leadership. They came together, knew how to work together, and met the challenge that could have turned into a forest fire in Brooklyn. And while my department in the Jewish Community Relations Council was formed because of Crown Heights, this could have made Crown Heights look like a blip, because it had all kinds of international stuff floating around with it too. So you as leaders have to make sure that not only you respond, but you prevent forest fires. So take that message from Smokey the Bear, only you can prevent forest fires. And also take that word from Max Weber, who said, you're the 2%, you make it happen. Thank you very much.
And now for the high part of the program. You've been listening to me all night talking about various things. Listen, I'd like to turn it over to someone who was a partner of mine in putting this together. And sometimes Susie likes to stand on the side and get things going. But Susie tremendously, because of her standing with the Borough President, because of her standing and reputation in the community, has been really a dynamic person in helping get all these people together. And what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Susie.
Well, I don't know how I'm going to live up to that reputation, Arthur, but I'll do my best. Good evening. Oh, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to begin by, because Arthur talked about President Marti and what a wonderful boss he is. Well, I want to tell you what a wonderful boss I have. Borough President Marshall is the inspiration behind the General Assembly, behind the Immigration Task Force. And this, I mean, she speaks truth to power. She really does. And what she said tonight, you know, is what she believes. It's what she has done her entire life. And it's the reason why we're here tonight. And I want to thank you, Borough President Marshall, for having the vision to bring us together here. I also, well, I'm going to save the other thank yous until later. As you can see, originally our program was going to lead into breakout groups, and we were going to ask each of you to go to another room in this building to have a discussion about where we go from here. We were really excited about this. We put a lot of work into this, but given the fact that it's 8:30, and we want to honor our commitment to all of you and end this program no later than 9. We are not going to do that. Instead, we're going to strategize as one big group. Now, before we do this, I want to acknowledge the people who were going to facilitate, who helped to organize tonight's program, and who have so much experience doing this type of work, and I want you to know who they are. So, give me one more minute. Okay, in no particular order, Katie Bracken from the New York City Human Rights Commission. Mr. Swaranjit Singh from the World Sikh Foundation. Dr. Sandra Delson from the Kupferberg Holocaust Resource Center. Mr. Mark Haken, I don't know if he's still in the room, but he is a community leader and a member of Community Board 8. In absentia, Dr. Madhulinga Khandelwal from the Asian American Center and the Urban Studies Program at Queensborough College. Manfred Corman from the ADL Education Committee and the CSA Retiree Chapter. We have Eva Kornatska from Pomoc, Polonians organized to minister to our community. Cynthia Zaliski from the Queens Jewish Community Council. Our friend Daniel Drum, who is a district leader in Jackson Heights. Sharon Lee from Councilman John Liu's office. We have Joyce Moy from LaGuardia Community College. And we have Dr. Helga Weiss from the ADL Education Committee. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all of the community leaders at this table because I know you had more insights and more stories to share, and I hope we'll have another opportunity to hear from you in the future. Thank you. Okay, so now back to you. What we want to do now is talk about what's next. And specifically, we want to ask you to consider this question. The question is, how can we take the information we got tonight back into our communities? And we want you to be specific. We really want you to brainstorm. What strategies can you think of that maybe some of the other people in the room could use as well to educate our communities on what a hate crime is, what you do if you think someone has been a victim of a hate crime, how do you spread the word? And in thinking about that, we also recognize that there are challenges to getting the word out, be they linguistic, be they what Leo Richter? Yes, mentioned that, some people don't want to approach the police because they were traumatized in completely different situations. Think about what the challenges are and how we can overcome those challenges. So that's sort of part A and part B. How can we get the word out and how can we address these challenges? And yes, Helen? Sure, yes, and after, okay, so Mr. Kalsa is going to get us started, and then what we want to do, because we want to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to say something if they want to, and we know some of you might be more inclined to listen to others, but we want to hear from you too, so we're going to take one person from this side of the room, then one person from that side of the room. It was a very good strategy that was recommended. So, Mr. Kalsa, why don't you start us off by talking about how we can get the word out? Yeah, okay. Is it?
Yeah, it's on. Thank you very much giving me chance to speak in front of you. When any baby come our home, small baby born in our home, what we are doing? We are hugging, loving all the time with our heart and feeding. Everybody in the family take care of that baby. But other way, my community, minority community, Sikh community, we are just like a new immigrant, new baby of America. But what happening with us? Instead of loving us, after the 9/11, when they see us as with having turban, Bin Laden. Bin Laden don't have the turban. The people land the aircraft on the Twin Tower, they didn't have the turban. And even, the bad my experience is, the cops, police are there to save us. Even many police officers don't recognize us still. When they see us, when I was beaten and left unconscious on the sidewalk, she came immediately to my home. She sit with me, lot of people were there. Like a family member, she was sitting with me, like hour. And what the report was written in police precinct? Few Arab people fight with American. Am I look like Arab? This police department don't know us in Richmond Hill, where we are maximum in numbers, living there since 40 years. And even department has to save us. They don't know we are Sikh. We are not Arab. If any Arab is there even, why you beat the Arab if they are innocent? Nobody should beat anyone because of the turban, because of the dress, religion. But what to say? The other thing, we came here with the great hope of living in freedom and better life for our families. But now, when I see a group of white people coming, I'm scared, afraid. The same, this is not only me. My community people still suffering because of our dress, because of our religion. Many of our Sikh religion people, they remove the turban. They are not practicing their religion. And when we come here, we came to know that we are free to practice our religion. But now we have so many changes. And even we have our religious sign like this bracelet. We say in our language, kada. And turban, beard and mustaches, and small holy knife. But the police people, they catch us. Oh, this is knife. So that knife is good for nothing if you want to fight with someone. But that is for us to practice our religion. And other thing, whenever whenever anybody attack a man as a hate crime, what they feel, all of us, they go injured, cannot work. If anybody cannot work, money cannot come to home, earnings stop. But bills never stops.
Right.
Once you pay the minimum charges to the bills, they increase with the penalty, fine, and interest rates. And what the poor guy will do, the first generation living here in America, is very hard for the first generation, not easy. Everybody knows here. When you start paying by the credit cards, credit card interest go very high. And then if you pay the minimum amount, the creditor, your credit go down.
Mr.
Like this,
Costa, yeah.
and then has to go for
Wrap up.
mortgage.
We need to.
Why don't you tell them what you did when it came to the conviction of these fellas who did this to you? What did you say to the judge?
So when the case was in the court, once it was reported, then administration take care of everything. That's correct. But when I went to the court, and judge asked me, the name was Supreme Court judge was Rodker, Mr. Rodker, he asked me, do you want to speak something? I said, yes. I want to say that they are ignorant. And I don't want you to send them jail for a long time. Give them community service. Reduce their jail. And, judge was agree with me. And judge was agree with me, and he wrote a sentence that after the jail, they will go to the community service, any church. Or I said, no, here I disagree with you. They should go to community service. They work community service in my Gurudwara. So they should know.
Temple.
They will go to the temple. So they should know why we are wearing turban, what we are doing in the Gurudwara, and why we are practicing this religion.
As Andrew just said, yes.
So
thank you, Mr. Khalsa. So one of the things Mr. Khalsa is saying very strongly is we have to educate people about our traditions and who we are and why we do things. And particularly, I heard you say we also have to be in touch with the police. We have to rely on the police, but we also have to educate the police so they understand who we are and what the symbols are that we have with us. So I also want you to know, or if you haven't noticed already, that Arthur Flug's amazing assistant director, Jamie Brody, is here. And as we strategize, Jamie is on the computer, and she's going to be typing up everything that we say. And in the end, we're going to have a long list, which we're going to distribute to all of you. And that's going to be part of the report of tonight's forum. So, okay, a lot of hands. Let's start with Phyllis.
Hi, everyone. I'm Phyllis Steinberg with PFLAG New York City. I'd like to talk about two things, what I do on a personal note and what our organization does. When I approach prejudice against the LGBT community, I have a gay son, and I love him. And I will stand here and proudly say, I love my gay son. And What I do when I approach prejudice is I confront it, and I will tell you a quick story. I have my hair done at Elizabeth Arden Salons on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, and it was the Columbus Day Parade, and I went there and watched the Columbus Day Parade before I went up to have my hair done. And when I went to have my hair washed, I said to the woman who was washing my hair, I really enjoyed watching that parade. And she said to me, you know, that was one of the good ones, but we have that gay parade coming through here, and they march around naked. So I said to her, oh, really? I march in that parade every year. I have a gay son. Well, she was stopped in her tracks because I am someone who she knew for many months. And that was education right there. And we need to stand up individually and confront hate and prejudice. The second thing I'd like to say is my organization has a program called Safe Schools. And we actually go into schools at the high school level and we talk about our family, the LGBT community. And I have been confronted with things there. Another quick story, and I won't tell you the whole thing. I said to the kids, I'm wondering if you could tell the difference between a gay person and a straight person. I said, I have 3 sons. 2 are straight and 1 is gay. And I'm going to show you a picture of my gay son and one of my straight sons. And I want you to tell me, look real carefully and tell me if you can tell the difference. So what did I do? I showed them a picture of my son when they were infants because I wanted to make the point people are born gay. And they looked at it and they laughed like it's the usual reaction I get. But then they said to me, which one is gay? And I usually don't tell, but this time I thought, well, you know, the high school kids, I'll tell. And when I said, this one is gay, the girl in the front of the room said, faggot, and the boy in the back of the room said, shoot him. But by the end of this session, without going into all the little details, both of those children were educated. The girl was educated immediately because she saw how it offended me, even though I was trying not to say it. I said, you know, that's like saying the N-word. And she apologized profusely. There's a long story how the boy in the back of the room was educated, but at the end, he came around too. So the point I'm trying to make here is twofold. One, stand up to prejudice when you meet it personally. And secondly, we have to go into the schools and educate students, people at young ages. Thank you for listening.
And we're going to go back and forth, so yes.
First of all, I'd like to endorse what you just said. Confront prejudice personally. There's a very powerful lawyer in our group, not in Flushing Quakers, but in the wider Quaker community, who took me and another woman aside to say bad things about a third person. It wasn't one of the categories. She just thought he was stupid. And I said, you know, I cannot participate in this conversation. And without batting an eyelash, she changed the subject. So they are not such big, scary monsters, the people who voice prejudice, and you can stand up to them. The other thing I wanted to say is that Flushing Quakers, for the last couple of years, have been trying to do outreach in the community, making connections with other religious groups. And it's been very hard. But if any of you are in the area, we want to form a relationship with you. So just know that.
Naomi, I do want to ask all of our speakers to think of specifics and to think strategically. You know, what can we do to take this information back to our community? Everything that everyone has said is extremely valuable. I just want to ask you to be a little more specific. What can we do to take this information back to our communities? I'm going to ask this gentleman who I don't think spoke yet.
My name is Stuart Kessler, co-chair of the Queens Lesbian and Gay Pride Committee, as well as various other organizations. And one of the things that we've done and we want to continue doing is networking and the dirty word politics. It's called organizing. After the murder of Julio Rivera, one of the first things that happened was a local elected official in South Queens announced that he would always support hate crimes legislation as long as it did not include sexual orientation. So we went out in the streets and demonstrated. And we started organizing. And we got a coalition of, we don't have enough lesbian and gay elected officials in Albany to get hate crimes passed, but it took a coalition and working together in groups to get that bill passed. It took someone like a Helen Marshall in the Assembly to help us. It took an organization of coalition to get Danny Drum elected, our first openly gay elected official here in the borough of Queens. It took a coalition to get 40,000 people to participate in a gay and lesbian parade and march and festival in Queens every year. I'm also involved with the AIDS Center of Queens County, and it takes a lot. 21 years ago, they wanted us out of any office we opened because we were bringing AIDS to the community. Now we have 9 offices in the borough of Queens working with communities throughout the borough, coalition working. It means going out and getting involved with needle exchange. Again, Helen Marshall in the Borough President's office getting it. And it means working together, and it means me with you, you with me. And it doesn't mean we just work isolated, because it's not going to work. Just like mentioned before, they came for you and it came for me and no one was left. We must work together, and that's the plan we must do.
I think the most important thing is education, particularly the young ones. Anita Weisbrot, Nassau County Tolerance Center. There was a case where a synagogue was desecrated, and the judge did not send them to prison, sent it to our Holocaust Center, where they had to study the Holocaust. 3 months later, they had to come back, and the parents had to come as well. After all, prejudice comes from the home. And after 3 months, they had to come back to court to present an article and what they have learned. And those kids came back different people. They had no idea why they were doing it. It was just ignorance. So I think education in the schools is the most important part.
Hi, my name is Florence Salgado. I am the secretary of Ebenezer Missionary Baptist Church here on Prince Street. And my idea, well, my thing is to take it back to the community, is to invite, like the young lady just said from the Quakers, invite them to our organization, to our church. Not necessarily, religion is great, we all know that, but we could also do community stuff, social stuff, get to know one another. You know, a lot of times we tend to stay by ourselves. I'm here with Catherine. I could have just as well went and sat over there with somebody white, but because we're used to doing this, we sit together. So maybe we need to reach out, even if we don't know each other. Say hi, how are you? Maybe you don't speak English. I can tell you how to say hi. I learned the word, shay shay. That means thank you. That's the only word I know, but I learned it. So we interact with each other. That's also a learning process. Thank you.
Paul Engel, I'm the Executive Director of the Flushing Jewish Community Council and also the Queens Counseling Services of FRMH. A couple of things. A while back, we did have, the council had a number of clergy, right, who met together on a regular basis back in around 2001, before and after. We also, beside that coalition, we also have multicultural activities, and in fact, I brought my board over to Chris's temple to get a first-hand notion, very educational about the Hindu religion. And in fact, we do a number of tours, and next week, actually, we're going to be educating people from New Jersey, from the Newark Museum, to, with Chris's help and Tariq, with a tour of South Asia. So there are a number of possibilities of reaching out. I know my friend here, Paul Klein from the Free Synagogue, now they have an annual program where they have 7 choirs from all different kinds, you know, Buddhist, Hindu, Christian, whatever, that come together on an annual basis. And we're going to be starting to bring speakers in to address the congregation. So there really has to be, on the grassroots level, this kind of interchange. Even more, you know, everybody needs to do that, I believe.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Monique Minnis, and I am PTA president and school leadership team with John Bowden High School. Have also been with the junior high school 189 and PS 20 elementary. Also, I'm on Helen Marshall's, the Borough President's educational task force that we're advisory. We meet at her office once a month. And I like to say she is the only borough president who has taken the initiative to do this, because all the others need to do it too, because it's needed. She brings us together with administration of the DOE, which is very important. It teaches us how to navigate. Most of us are going to be respectful to one another. Most of us in this room. But the bad boys, the bad girls, the ones that fall through the cracks, that's who also make up our community and also do a lot of the bad things to one another, to each other, when we talk about these hate crimes and whatnot. But I feel very strongly that we need to go into our schools, all right, and bring out PTA, parents having a PTA meeting and the kids there and working with these kids, because kids will take it home. They will, because parents will say, whether they have dinner early, whether they have dinner late, they will say to the kids, what happened in school today? Grandparents will say, gee, what's happening in your school? What did you do? My daughter called me today from Virginia. My grandson said, oh, Nana, oh, I did so good at school. I said, oh, really? Yeah, you should reward me. What did you do? So you see, kids take things home to the family. Whether family members want to agree with it or not, they still take it home. So, and our children, whether, you know, we even have 20-year-old kids and 21-year-old kids, and the younger ones are many of the ones who are perpetrating this. They learn this. They're not born with this hatred. They learn it. So, and maybe in our civic groups, having meetings all the time, having people come in and exchanging, like this guy was saying, this gentleman here was saying, exchanging.
We're going to take two more. I'm sorry, everyone, but we're going to take two more.
I was watching that list as the young lady keeps typing it up, and I see that one point I wanted to raise hasn't yet come up. I'm thrilled. But one lady beat me to it. The most important factor we seem to be forgetting is the family unit. It all starts at home. One lady raised that before. And that is where we are not taught. It's no use going to the schools, to the communities, if the child goes back home and the father is saying, oh, he's black, don't bring him home. And recently there was the dog, who was a national telecaster on radio. He was objecting to his son dating a black woman. And the son taped him and passed it on to the Inquirer. He lost his job on radio. But that is what we have to do. The most important thing is start at home, and that is where we have to take it from. Thank you.
Hey, there are a few more speakers, and then we'll wrap up.
Cynthia Zalisky, Queens Jewish Community Council. I just have a suggestion. And I know because recently, and Borough President knows this well, when we had to have a press conference from our recent hate crime issue at Young Israel of Hillcrest, for us was the idea of knowing which community leaders to notify. If you could put together, Jamie, for let us be an ad hoc task force, so that we'll notify each other. God forbid we have to, but for the good things. But at least that we all stand together always, for good things, for the bad things. So let us be an ad hoc task force, just the people in this room.
Go back over there. We have 4 minutes left, everyone. So please keep your comments brief.
I just had come from court for a Pakistani family. We have a lot of developers in our neighborhood, as I know Helen knows about, and they passed the zoning for downzoning in a certain area. They dismissed it and destroyed a Pakistani family on both sides of their home. And they told them, well, go back to your country. We went to court and we won. The reason is our organization supported them. What needs to be done is that no matter what, you're going to have to carry your victims through the problem. You can't just say you're there, have a meeting, and then leave them. You have to go with them all the way, even after they win their case. That's when you get the support of every nationality behind you, and I have 7. My organization is known as the Coalition of United Residents, and I'm very proud to be part of the Queen's General Assembly. Thank you.
2 of you, and then I think we're...
Again, just trying to be somewhat concrete, I'm Joyce Moy from LaGuardia College. One of the things that I like to do is to really talk to immigrants about the civil rights history in this country so that they understand the thinking and the constitutional underpinnings for all of the things that we're talking about, because I think it's important for immigrants particularly to understand the issue of slavery, Reconstruction, and the civil rights movement, and that it's only very, very recent history that has brought us those civil rights. I talk to a lot of student groups. For example, there are a lot of ethnic student groups at the college and at all of the various colleges, and we try to do things that bring them together as well, because that's the next group of leaders that we're going to have.
I'm Helga Weiss. I'm on the ADL Education Committee. I'm also a clinical psychologist in private practice. And I wanted to underscore the education part that everyone is saying, that we should reach youngsters early. But I also wanted to just mention the 2 latest victims who were colleagues of mine of hate crimes at Teachers College that you've all heard about. And the president of the American Psychological Association put it very well. She said, first of all, in explaining, she said that Dr. Elizabeth Midlarski, the latest victim, is a clinical psychologist who has very thoroughly studied the Holocaust. And Dr. Madonna G. Constantine, an African-American psychologist who found a noose on her door as opposed to the swastika on Dr. Midlarski's door. Dr. Constantine has an expertise in multicultural studies. So what this president of my organization said, what both these professors have in common is that they're members of minority groups who have become renowned scholars on the history of prejudice. The person or persons who perpetrated these crimes chose their methods to have these most hateful messages of the lexicon, knowing they would reverberate beyond these 2 women to the African American community and to the Jewish community. And that is the hallmark of a hate crime, that it goes beyond the immediate target and it hurts all the people. And she also made the point that, teaching diversity at an early age, we have studies and research to show that that is most effective.
Our last comment will come from Yoon Shin Kim.
Good evening, my name is Yeon-shin Kim. I represent New Americans program at Queens Library. I just want to speak to you on behalf of Services to Immigrants, because New Americans program has been providing learning opportunities to new immigrants in the United States, in this county. And I want to bring to your attention that we've been organizing seminars, multilingual seminars and multicultural programs. And this is very great information for us to disseminate it during our programs. So I was just wondering about whether this information brochure has been translated, And if we can get those information in our library system, that we can definitely utilize the information and give out to our attendees of the programs. And also, if we get to know community leaders who can speak and talk about these issues at our programs, we are willing to invite those speakers to be part of our program information seminars. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much to all the speakers. I apologize to those of you who wanted to say something. This is really just the beginning. Borough President, did you want to say something now? Okay.
I think the first thing that we have to all, in this room, if everyone would commit themselves to look at people with an open heart and an open mind. That's the beginning. Every day in your life, there's probably some way that you can connect with other people, aside from your own group. And it really, and also to our new immigrant groups, they should also be more open. They have a different problem, because very often they can't speak the language. And I had suggested when I first got into office that we could, in the schools, we could take two children, and I'm a teacher, and I'm an early childhood teacher. Children come into this world pure, they really do. And I suggested we take two children, one who speaks the foreign language and one who speaks very good English, and just let them be together in a buddy system. Their play, their discussions with one another, they'll learn both languages. And it's great to be bilingual in this world. You know, that's a very important thing to do. In order to graduate from college, I had to take 16 credits in a foreign language. It was Spanish. But it's only going to be sharpened if I'm able to go to one of those countries and immerse myself in it. But still in all, I find what I do know I can pick up here and there. The other thing is, we're such a multicultural borough. And when I talked about the Queens General Assembly, you have people moving on your block, sometimes from maybe 4 or 5 different countries. Get to know your neighbors. Just go and knock on the door sometime. You know, we have a South Asian couple that moved 2 doors from my house, and they did a beautiful job with doing over the house and fixing it up nice. And I saw them one day, and when you show me a child, that's it, I'm finished, you know. And so the young lady who was pregnant, she gave birth to a baby, and I think it was the first baby in that house. And when I just admired her child and said how beautiful she is, she's now pregnant again, there was a bonding between our families. And believe me, I'm going to give that, I gave to the first baby, and I'm going to give to the second one. Just reach out, because especially when they live on your block, you know, and instead of saying, ooh, what about those people? Now, sometimes the things are negative, like sometimes the music, you're not accustomed to the music and the music is played all the time. How do you approach your neighbor about that? It's really much better if you start off with love. If you start with just a pleasant word, just because the family was like, well, I don't know, you know, how people are going to take me on this block. But the minute I just smiled at them, that was so much and so very important. So I think if we all just, and I know most of the people in this room will do that, but sometimes go out of your way. Go out of your way and welcome them. And also in different groups, smile at people once in a while. You know, don't look, and many people do that. You know, just smile and just be yourself. That would be very important. But if you just organize even on your own block, it makes a big difference.
That's a wonderful segue into next steps and wrap up. I want you all to know again that Jamie is going to be printing out this list. We're going to send it to all of you. Now, what we want you to do, we're asking you to go back into your communities and use some of these strategies to spread the word. And in a couple of months, we're going to get in touch with all of you. We'd like to come back together and find out from you how it worked, what worked well, what could work better, and share best practices, as they say. So we are going to be in touch with you. Those are the next steps. Now, before you leave, I must say one more thank you and leave you with one personal note. The thank you goes to Dr. Arthur Flug. Arthur has worked literally day and night on this project, on this forum for months. And I've learned so much from working with him. Now, behind every great executive director, there's a great assistant director and there's a great committee. And I'd actually like to ask the committee members to stand up so we can recognize you, along with Jamie. Okay. Now, you can sit down for one last minute. I want to just end on a personal note, and that is, as some of you know, I am the daughter of a Holocaust refugee. And some of you know that my mother was on the committee that helped to organize this forum. Now, my mother was a very small child when she lived in Nazi Germany, but she was old enough to remember the bias incidents and the hate crimes that were committed against her family and her community. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that for so many of us in this room, tonight's topic was not an abstraction. It was rooted in real experiences that either we had or that people we love very much had, and that's why this means so much to us. And as many people mentioned, hate crimes, the purpose of hate crimes is to make people feel isolated and vulnerable and alone. And what we have to remember is that we are one community, as the Borough President said. We are one multi-ethnic community. And from here on out, let's go out into our communities and spread that message. And I think we can really make a difference in fighting hate crimes in this borough. So, okay. And without further ado now, I want to wish you a safe trip home and thank you for coming, because without you, this wouldn't have happened.